Hurricane Brett is the year's first Atlantic hurricane and is expected to make landfall later today. For more on that, we go to CNN's Charles Ziwi, who's in Port Isabel, Texas.
Wolf, here in Port Isabel, Texas, you can see what conditions have been all morning long. Winds and rains, gale force winds increasing throughout the morning along 220 miles of Texas coastline. Things not too bad right now, expected to get a lot worse as the day progresses. Brett is a tightly packed but powerful and dangerous hurricane. Ahead of the storm last night and all night last night, you can see what's been happening. People have been coming off South Padre Island, which is a very popular resort area here in South Texas. Thousands of people told to get off the island, that possibly a 14 to 15 foot tall storm surge could sweep across the barrier island, inundating homes and hotels and possibly drowning lots of people. Being told that, people got out of the way and got out of the way in a hurry. The island closed off earlier this morning to anyone going back over to the barrier island. Officials are telling everyone from Port O'Connor, Texas, north of Corpus Christi, well south of where we are right now, to watch out that Brett could angle back into the coast all of a sudden. Forecasters are telling people here they still expect the storm to go inland sometime later today or early tomorrow morning, somewhere south of Corpus Christi. This is the scene in the bay immediately behind South Padre Island. Water's not too bad right now. A storm surge, however, if it came into the area where I am right now, could put water above the level of those pilings right back over there. So this is a dangerous storm. Officials are telling everyone not to take any chances. A Category 4 storm can cause extreme damage, not only from the winds, the sustained 140-mile-an-hour winds, but also from tornadoes spun off from the hurricane and from that storm surge that I talked about earlier. The Texas coast is braced at this hour for a hit. Officials are expecting some major damage from this storm. Wolf?
Okay, thanks, Charles Ziwi reporting from Port Isabel, Texas. Now for a closer look at the path of Hurricane Brett, let's check in with CNN's Orlin Sidney, who's in the CNN Weather Center. Orlin?
Wolf, thanks a lot. Our storm is indeed quite strong. Again, the winds, as Charles said, just about 140 miles an hour. The storm is now moving to the northwest at about 10 miles an hour, and there's some indication that it may be starting to slow down and make a turn. We were kind of expecting it to do a little turn off to the west. The current track looks like it's going to place it somewhere south of Corpus Christi within about the next 9 to 10 hours. So you're looking at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock Central Time is the point at when the eye will probably cross the coast. Don't be too concerned about the actual eye. That's, of course, where the heaviest storm surge will be, and that's, of course, where the strongest winds are. But remember that hurricane force winds extend out 135 miles, or excuse me, 35 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds extend out 100 miles from the center. So definitely a problem even if it comes within 100 miles of the coast. Right now we're seeing those winds again at 140 miles an hour. That is a Category 4 storm. At 156 miles an hour it will become Category 5. Doesn't look like that's too likely, though. We could see some fluctuations in strength. It is expected to go across the coast at 140 miles an hour. Strike probabilities best at Corpus Christi. Those have been going up throughout the morning. Port O'Connor has also seen an increase from 38% to 50%, but around Corpus Christi seems to be the best place right now, and a hurricane warning is in effect. Gene?
That's Wolf, Orlin, but of course stay with CNN for all of the latest on this Hurricane Brett, and we'll of course break in if there's any developments during the course of late edition.
We are faced with a very serious weather situation. Hurricane Brett is a Category 4 hurricane, and it's heading towards the South Texas coast. In many ways, this storm is very much like Hurricane Andrew, which ravaged the South Florida coast and the central Gulf State coast in 1992. This storm has sustained winds of 140 miles an hour, like Andrew. It is a compact storm, which means that its winds are being focused in a very small area, which makes this storm especially hazardous for that area. The very unfortunate thing about Andrew is that the very fortunate thing about this storm, in contrast to Andrew, is that it's moving much slower than Hurricane Andrew, and that has very important negative consequences for the South Texas coast. The current position of the storm is about 70 miles east-northeast of Brownsville, and it's moving at 10 miles per hour. Its central pressure is 944 millibars, which indicates that it's a very deep storm. And the storm is the first Category 4 storm to threaten South Texas since Hurricane Carla in 1961. Hurricane Brett has the clear potential of producing a major disaster. It has the ingredients to threaten life and property in many ways. These ways include storm surge, flooding from rains, high winds, and tornadoes. Our biggest concern right now is the inundation of the barrier islands and low-lying coastal areas because of a storm surge expected on the order of 10 to 15 feet. Heavy rains over the next several days are also expected to create major flooding. High winds will uproot anything not well secured, including mobile homes, and create missiles out of the debris. Tornadoes are always a threat with landfalling hurricanes, including those areas that are fairly far away from the eye of the storm by several hundred miles. As part of the Department of Commerce, the staff of the National Weather Service has been working around the clock as the nation's Department of Defense against weather threats. American taxpayers have supported the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the Department of Commerce in the development of the world's most sophisticated weather defense system. NOAA's weather satellites have been keeping an eye on the storm area for the last couple of days. National Weather Service NEXRAD radars, which you see whenever you turn on the television and you're looking at the weather forecast, are tracking the storm as it approaches the land. The Brownsville radar is clearly showing the eye of the storm as it's approaching the Texas coast. Computers at the National Centers for Environmental Prediction in Washington, D.C. have been working overtime and are churning out possible forecasts of the storm track as we speak right now. Most importantly are the highly trained people of the Tropical Prediction Center of the National Weather Service and the employees elsewhere throughout the National Weather Service who will integrate all of this weather information and provide the forecasts needed so people can make decisions to get themselves out of harm's way. The current National Weather Service forecast...
All right, we've been hearing from Jim Hoke. He's with the National Weather Service describing what seems to be a major, powerful hurricane that's about to approach the Texas Gulf Coast. Of course,
southward to La Pesca, Mexico, even though it looks very unlikely that we'll get hurricane conditions too much further to the south here as the focus is really turning northward. Hurricane watch is in effect from Port O'Connor to Freeport, also a tropical storm warning in effect for this same area. Coastal flood warning is in effect from Freeport to High Island, so that's extending all the way up just about to the Sabine River. What we're seeing now is about an 81% chance that our storm will make a landfall somewhere around Corpus Christi. I think late tonight, probably about 8 to 9 p.m. local time, 50% chance up at Port O'Connor. The chances are also going up at Brownsville, but the heaviest increase has definitely been across the central Texas coast. And this is what we think. An upper-level ridge is going to take the storm and generally move it westward. We're starting to see a little bit of a westward turn, I think, on the latest satellite pictures.
Brett rast in Richtung Mexiko und Texas. Tausende Menschen sind auf der Flucht, versuchen noch notdürftig ihre Häuser zu sichern. Experten warnen vor dem Sturm. Er sei der schwerste Hurrikan in dieser Gegend seit über 10 Jahren. Auch in den USA beginnt jetzt wieder die Zeit der gewaltigen Stürme. Im Golf von Mexiko braut sich zurzeit ein riesiger Hurrikan zusammen und bedroht Tausende von Menschen. Katinka Platner über die Angst am Golf.
Den Menschen zwischen Texas und Mexiko bleiben nur noch wenige Stunden, um ihre Häuser zu sichern. Dann müssen sie sich selbst in Sicherheit bringen. Tausende sind auf der Flucht. Die Highways schon jetzt verstopft. Heute Nacht, spätestens morgen früh, soll Hurricane Brett mit mehr als 220 Stundenkilometern die Küste erreichen. Experten haben ihn in die zweithöchste Gefahrenstufe eingeordnet. Die Angst der Menschen ist berechtigt, denn die Zerstörungskraft eines Hurrikans ist gewaltig. Ähnlich wie bei Wirbelsturm Mitch im vergangenen Jahr drohen sintflutartige Regenfälle, Überschwemmungen, Erdrutsche. Allein in Mittelamerika kamen bei dieser Naturkatastrophe 9000 Menschen ums Leben. Und niemand weiß, wo Brett genau zuschlagen wird. Bedroht ist ein 400 Kilometer langer Küstenstreifen zwischen La Pesca in Mexiko und Corpus Christi in Texas. Brett ist der stärkste Hurrikan vor dieser Küste seit über 10 Jahren. In Mexiko hat der Katastrophenschutz schon Notunterkünfte für 16.000 Menschen eingerichtet. Ich kann mich genau an den letzten Hurrikan erinnern. Er hat alles zerstört, auch mein Haus. Der Wirbelsturm hat inzwischen an Geschwindigkeit zugenommen. Selbst wer diesmal noch davonkommt, muss weiter zittern. Über dem Atlantik entsteht schon der nächste Hurrikan.
Des US-Bundesstaates Texas erreicht. Zehntausende sind auf der Flucht vor dem Sturm, den Meteorologen als Monster Hurricane angekündigt haben. Brett wütet jetzt mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von über 200 Stundenkilometern über dem Festland. Mehr weiß Stefan Katzenberger.
Die ersten Ausläufer von Brett erreichten die texanische Küste kurz vor Einbruch der Dunkelheit. Peitschender Regen und Sturmböen fegten über einen mehr als 100 Kilometer breiten Küstenabschnitt hinweg. Zu diesem Zeitpunkt glichen die meisten Orte wie hier Corpus Christi schon Geisterstädten. Zehntausende hatten im Lauf des Tages ihre Häuser zum Schutz vor Brett vernagelt und sich dann Richtung Landesinnere in Sicherheit gebracht. Wer sich fürs Bleiben entschied, der deckte sich in Hamsterkäufen mit dem Nötigsten ein, alarmiert von der deutlichen Warnung der Behörden. Hurricane Brett hat ganz klar das Potenzial für eine große Katastrophe. Er bedroht das Leben der Menschen an der Küste sowohl durch die Wellen, die er bringt, als auch durch Überschwemmungen und Tornados. Staatsgouverneur George Bush erklärte vorsorglich 7 Gebiete zum Katastrophengebiet. Doch der Hurrikan war bislang gnädig. Er änderte seinen Kurs, schwächte sich etwas ab und nahm sich nur einen kaum besiedelten Küstenabschnitt zwischen Corpus Christi und Brownsville vor. Doch die Behörden geben noch keine Entwarnung. Sie rechnen damit, dass sich erst in den nächsten Stunden endgültig entscheidet, ob Brett nicht doch noch zum Monstersturm wird.
Auf Hurricane Brett vom Satelliten aus. Gestern lag er ja noch hier über dem Golf von Mexiko. Sie kennen die Halbinsel Yucatan, Florida und die USA. Da sehen Sie deutlich das Auge. Inzwischen ist er auf Land raufgezogen und hat sich mehr und mehr abgeschwächt. Er wird sich wahrscheinlich weiter abschwächen, wenn er nicht wieder über das warme Wasser des Golfs von Mexiko kommt.
Der erste Hurrikan der Saison traf in der Region um die Stadt Corpus Christi auf das Festland und richtete nach vorläufigen Berichten keine schweren Schäden an. Stürmische See, heftige Regenfälle, vorübergehende Stromausfälle, das war die vorläufige Bilanz der Behörden. Bislang gab es keine Meldungen über Verletzte.
Hurricane Brett has been battering southern Texas with some of the strongest winds it's seen in almost 20 years. CNN's Sean Calebs is in Corpus Christi, close to where the hurricane came ashore.
This area of the Texas coastline still getting hit with strong, steady wind. But the harsh rains, at times coming down in almost horizontal sheets, have subsided greatly. Right now, Hurricane Brett located about 60 miles south of Corpus Christi. It has stalled and dumping tremendous amounts of rain. Here in Corpus Christi, authorities believe they have dodged a bullet and missed much of the damage. And to a large degree, they credit their preparedness. Brett whipped the Texas surf. Whitecaps slamming into and over the seawall, protecting Corpus Christi. The region's 250,000 people had heard the forecasters' warnings.
They say this was a rough one, but we'll see.
A Category 4 hurricane, Brett was quickly downgraded to a 3 as it came ashore. Brett did the predictable, downing trees and causing sporadic power outages. After dark, steady winds and driving rain continued. Authorities are issuing advisories about the possibility of flooding and concerns about tornadoes. Much of Corpus Christi looked like a tens of thousands heeded warnings and headed north to escape the wind and rain. Set up as far north as Austin to house those who have nowhere else to turn. Police are now concerned that many evacuees may be coming back into this area too soon. The storm has stalled and has dumped as much as 10 inches of rain in some areas. The threat of flooding and tornadoes still very real. In Corpus Christi, I'm Sean Calebs. Now back to you.
Shore Sunday night south of the city of Corpus Christi, Texas. CNN's Charles Ewe joins us now with a look at the damage that the storm left behind. Charles?
Jonathan, so far, most of this area has escaped major destruction from Hurricane Brett after it thrashed ashore yesterday about 70 miles south of where I'm standing right now. Here in Corpus Christi, winds continue to be gusty. Every now and then we'll get a rain squall through this area, but the weather is improving rapidly. In fact, officials are saying the remnants of Hurricane Brett, now Tropical Storm Brett, should be out of this area completely by the middle of the night tonight. Not the same situation to the west of us, however, in the town of Falfurrias. Officials there are saying many homes and businesses in that town have been damaged by Hurricane Brett. The eye of the storm passed over this little town of 5,800 people, which is located about 60 miles south-southwest of Corpus Christi, well inland from the Gulf of Mexico, at 3 a.m. local time today. The businesses damaged, homes damaged, power knocked out. The major road leading into and out of the town has been blocked by debris, but no one has been reported injured here. Meanwhile, in Corpus Christi, the torrential rains accompanying Hurricane Brett dumped 10 to 15 inches of rain on some parts of this area, higher totals to the south of here. But in Corpus Christi, that was enough to cause street flooding that prompted some people to have to use boats to get to and from their homes. But again, like in most of Texas, the state emergency management officials here in Texas are saying there have been no reports of serious injuries anywhere in this storm. And the biggest problems right now are from the continued threat of flooding from this storm, which could dump anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of additional rain on the south central part of this state, and from the flooding from flash flooding from local rivers. Now in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico right now, Mexican government officials are urging people living in low-lying areas along the Rio Grande there to move out of their homes. There's a good deal of worry that this storm could cause some flash flooding there. A year ago today in nearby Del Rio, Texas, rains from Tropical Storm Charlie caused flash flooding in Del Rio, a flash flood that killed 20 people and destroyed hundreds of homes. People there still recovering from that disaster. So overall, Jonathan, situation from Brett is that it could have been much, much worse. It was a Category 4 storm, and at one time on Sunday, officials feared that there could be extreme destruction from that storm. But because the storm made landfall over a sparsely populated area of the Texas coast and moved inland, the damage is not that bad. This area expected to make a quick recovery. Jonathan?
Charles, a lot of people moved out trying to get away from that storm. Are they all back in their homes now, digging out?
Not yet. And again, there's not much digging out to do because there's not much damage. About 325 to 340,000 people moved away from the coastline and moved back up to San Antonio, which is about 150 miles away. Spent the night in shelters, and officials are saying that based on their initial assessments of damage, they probably will be allowed to get back to their homes fairly soon. What they will encounter coming back, though, however, is a lot of rain on the roadways, and officials are saying that the drivers should be careful about ponding on roadways. Ponding is where water builds up and floods low-lying areas of the roadway, that they should be careful that roadways that they drove on Saturday and Sunday leaving the area, that roadways that were dry will now be flooded. Jonathan?
Charles Seaweed, thanks very much. Vanilla?
Auf den tropischen Wirbelsturm, auf den Hurricane Brett. Das ist ein Bild von gestern Abend. Und jetzt, wo man weiß, dass der Sturm nicht so heftig ausgefallen ist, wie es eigentlich sein sollte, oder wie er vorhergesagt wurde, kann man sagen, es ist ein besonders schönes Exemplar, weil man hier sehr gut dieses sogenannte windstille Auge erkennen kann. Er ist ja dann weiter ins Landesinnere gezogen. Er hatte zu diesem Zeitpunkt gestern Abend immerhin noch Windgeschwindigkeiten von 225 Kilometer in der Stunde, hat sich aber jetzt mittlerweile doch schon deutlich abgeschwächt. Hier kann man übrigens auch noch das Auge erkennen. Ist also jetzt ins Landesinnere gezogen und hat mittlerweile nur noch Windgeschwindigkeiten von 140 Kilometer in der Stunde, was ja auch nicht gerade wenig ist. So viel zu diesen Informationen, und jetzt wünsche ich Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend.
Tote und Verletzte gab es dennoch nicht. 15.000 Küstenbewohner hatten rechtzeitig ihre Häuser verlassen können. Doch die Gefahr ist noch nicht vorüber. Der Wetterdienst warnt jetzt vor Überschwemmungen. Mehr dazu von Johannes Böning.
Regen peitscht über die verlassenen Straßen. Die Palmen biegen sich im Wind, einknicken tun sie nicht. In der Nacht ist der Hurricane Brett hereingebrochen über die texanische Stadt Corpus Christi. Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 220 Kilometern pro Stunde. Später schwächte er sich auf 185 ab. Ein paar abgedeckte Dächer, das ist wohl die ganze Schadensbilanz des ersten großen Wirbelsturms in den USA dieses Jahr. Am Morgen zwar noch große Wellen, aber die Leute trauen sich schon wieder raus. Es ist nicht mehr so angsteinflößend, das Schlimmste ist vorbei. Wie Sie sehen, wir sind rausgegangen, haben unsere Kinder im Auto dabei. Das Glück für die Bewohner, kurz vor der Küste dreht der Wirbelsturm ab. Das sogenannte Auge traf das Festland 100 Kilometer weiter südlich als erwartet, dort, wo kaum ein Mensch wohnt. Zehntausende hatten die Küstenregion am Tag zuvor verlassen, viele suchten in Notunterkünften Platz. Sie müssen dort noch etwas ausharren. Der Wetterdienst warnte, wegen heftiger Regenfälle könnte es zu Überschwemmungen kommen.
This time of year, our attention turns to the tropics, and with good reason. We have several systems to talk about. This is Cindy right here in the middle of the Atlantic. We'll keep an eye on that one in the next few days as it tracks to the north-northwest. We are also watching Emily. Emily, right here, you can see this cluster of clouds. It is a tropical storm interest in the eastern Caribbean. Pay close attention to that system. It is fairly close to land. And we also have Dennis. Dennis expected to become a hurricane in the next 12 to 24 hours, moving generally in a north-northwesterly direction. There are several watches and warnings posted along the Bahamas. And interest in the southeastern U.S. Should keep a very close eye on this system in the next few days, possibly by Friday night, Saturday morning, definitely by the weekend. This system should be approaching land in the southeastern U.S., and we will have to watch it closely. Well, moving closer to homes in the southeastern U.S., we do have the possibility of some rain showers in Florida, but the heavier rain showers should be right across the mid-Atlantic region as a low-pressure system begins to approach the area. You can see that a little bit better here. Here's that system sliding across the Great Lakes region. Notice how ahead of the cold front, we do have a lot of activity across the area. The heavier rain showers right in here, moving into the northeastern U.S. as well. High pressure builds in behind that. Still some rain showers across portions of southern Texas, but generally quiet across the west, all the way up into Seattle and also Washington State.
Verehrte Zuschauer, jetzt wollen wir doch noch einmal auf den Atlantik herunterblicken, denn dort hat sich Hurrikan Dennis gebildet. Er liegt hier gerade so vor den Bahamas. Und in den nächsten Stunden wird er auf die Bahamas zuziehen, aber mit seinem windstärksten Bereich an den Bahamas vorbei. Und seine Zielrichtung ist letztlich South Carolina. Da wird er am Montag erwartet und Sie sehen mit ganz gewaltigen Windgeschwindigkeiten. So viel für heute vom Wetter. Guten Abend.
United States as Hurricane Dennis lurks in the Atlantic. A hurricane watch is in effect for coastal Florida north of Cape Kennedy to the Georgia border. The director of the National Hurricane Center, Jerry Jarrell, says they are monitoring the storm's intensity.
Our intensity models are for the first time suggesting that Dennis could become a major hurricane, a borderline Category 3. Now, that assumes landfall in South Carolina. Obviously, if it makes landfall in Florida, the time to intensify would be more limited, so it probably would not be that strong.
Jarrell says Dennis could make landfall within 36 hours, but he says the storm's path is difficult to predict and it could swerve to the north, missing the mainland altogether. Now, for more on Hurricane Dennis and the rest of the U.S. weather picture, here's CNN's Mari Ramos.
We'll begin this look at your American edition weather, talking about Hurricane Dennis. Dennis moving still on that west-northwest track, going right over the Bahamas, as you can see here. Hurricane force winds are being experienced along that area. There are several watches and warnings posted, not only for the Bahamas, but also for portions of the U.S. In the last advisories, we did have some hurricane watches posted for portions of northern Florida. Now, let's head to the north. We do see still some activity across the northeastern U.S. with those rain showers. Most of this activity should begin to push away to the ocean, at least by tonight or early by Saturday morning. Let's take a look at our weather map now, and you'll notice how we have generally quiet conditions across the west, very little chance of rain showers. You can see some rain showers across the southwestern U.S. and into northwestern Mexico, as you can see here. And we have another cold front rolling down into the Great Lakes region. Slightly cooler temperatures there with that frontal system. We put our map into motion and notice how by Saturday, the low pressure system that had been bringing the rain into the northeast moves very, very slowly. Most of the rain showers should be ending. This trough here is what we'll be watching in relation to Hurricane Dennis in the next few days. It could have an impact as to whether the system moves inland or stays offshore. So do pay close attention to that in the next 24 to 48 hours.
An uneven crawl toward the southeastern coast of the U.S. Beachfront businesses began storm preparations as Dennis threatened to throw a wrench in late summer tourism. The storm could strike the U.S. coast as early as Saturday. Gale force winds and heavy surf are already being reported in the northwestern portion of the Bahamas. Hurricane watches have been posted for coastal Florida north of Cape Canaveral to the Georgia border, but forecasters warn the storm could turn to the north, threatening the beachfront resort of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Hurricane Dennis has been particularly frustrating to weather experts whose predictions can affect the lives and finances of millions of people. CNN's Susan Candiotti reports.
As Dennis churns its way through the Atlantic, forecasters here at the National Hurricane Center are working hard to predict where the storm will make landfall.
We need to build in a little bit of a buffer, knowing that the storm probably won't be exactly where we forecast it to be. It might be a little bit on one side or the other.
Tracking Dennis or any other hurricane is a daunting task. Hurricane Hunter aircraft slice through the storm to measure the size of the eye, barometric pressure, and wind speeds at different altitudes. Computers use these and other data to calculate intricate models, 10 at a time. Satellite technology monitors size and movement. How accurate can forecasts be?
Storm makes landfall within a 200-mile radius, it's probably a good forecast. 8 and 10 years ago, that was a 300-mile radius. So they are improving their forecast drastically.
Their efforts help determine exactly when and where to post hurricane watches and then warnings as Dennis threatens land. Along with protecting lives, hurricane forecasts carry a big price tag for those affected. Every time the National Hurricane Center posts a hurricane watch or warning, county governments spend at least $1 to $3 million per square mile of populated coastline. For example, Hurricane George dealt only a glancing blow to Miami-Dade County, but officials say they spent at least $11 million on evacuation, manpower, and other preparations. In contrast, Hurricane Brett did Texas a favor by slamming into the least populated county in that state. The coast of the Carolinas has many more residents and tourists.
The National Hurricane Center is issuing advisories on Hurricane Dennis.
Emergency planners put it simply: people need to listen to their advice.
Well, I just tell them one thing. Just remember, it's their life at stake.
But emergency planners say their guidance is only as good as the information they glean from their ever-improving technology.
Zu Hurricane Dennis, der heute Vormittag in der Nähe der Bahamas getobt hat mit Spitzengeschwindigkeiten von 145 Kilometer in der Stunde. Sein Kurs beträgt im Moment nordöstliche Richtungen und es wird damit gerechnet, dass er am Montag an Land geht und bis dahin soll er sich auch noch verstärken. Hier am Bildrand kann man es kaum erkennen, aber da liegt schon der nächste Hurricane. Die Hurricane-Saison ist ja voll im Gange und den können wir besser noch auf diesem Bild erkennen. Er dreht sich dort, er hat zwar schon einen Namen, aber auch ein Auge, aber man kann eben im Moment noch nicht sagen, wo er genau hinzieht. Es bleibt zu hoffen, dass er hier eben nicht weiter Richtung Westen zieht, sondern mehr in kühlere Gewässer und dann eben nicht an Land geht. Das war's für heute. Sie werden sicherlich nächste Woche noch mehr dazu hören. Ich wünsche Ihnen erstmal ein schönes Wochenende.
For the latest on Dennis, we now join meteorologist Jill Brown at the CNN Weather Center.
This is the latest on Hurricane Dennis. A new update, and the next one comes in 3 hours. Until it gets closer to the coast, every 3 hours we'll have new information. And what we're likely to see is that the winds will continue to increase. We've seen just a slight increase from 100 to 105 miles per hour. That makes this a Category 2 hurricane, moving slowly to the northwest at 6 miles per hour. That time spent over warm water will allow this to gain more strength, we do believe. And within 24 hours, still over the water, it is likely to be a Category 3 hurricane. So the latest satellite picture here shows the eye very clearly moving away from the Bahamas. Mainly clear skies, a few scattered showers and thunder showers. Some of those bands have been coming into Florida. The surf is increasing, the winds will increase, and tropical storm force winds are expected along the Florida coastline tomorrow afternoon. So we do have some watches. So far, only hurricane watches, no warnings, and they're only in Florida. But we think that later this evening, they'll probably be extended farther north along the coast. So from Fernandina Beach to Sebastian Inlet, it's a hurricane watch, the possibility of hurricane force winds. Tropical storm warnings are in effect because by tomorrow afternoon, we think the hurricane will be close enough that we will have tropical storm force winds. We'll keep you up to date. Now back to Ulrika in the newsroom.
All right, thanks, Jill. We'll keep you updated on the story as it develops, of course.
From the CNN Center in Atlanta, seen live around the world, this is World View. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Hall. Like a top spinning quickly but moving forward slowly, Hurricane Dennis gathers strength as it heads toward the U.S. Atlantic coast. The Category 2 hurricane is 180 miles east of Cape Canaveral, Florida, with winds clocked at 105 miles an hour. But the storm is lumbering ahead at just 6 miles an hour. Watches and alerts are posted and emergency preparations are underway from Florida to North Carolina. The Florida coast could start feeling the effects of Dennis Sunday. We go now to the CNN Weather Center where Jill Brown is tracking the storm. Jill?
Good evening, Andrea. We have been watching this one a little bit different than last week's storm that gained strength so quickly. This one is having a gradual increase in strength. So the winds, this last update went up just 5 miles per hour, 105 miles per hour, moving to the northwest at 6. That slow movement will keep it over the warm Gulf Stream waters, giving it the chance to strengthen more through the next 24, 48, all the way up to 72 hours. The official forecast keeps it over water. Good news and bad news. Chance to gain more strength, but perhaps a chance to still make landfall. So that's still in question if it'll make landfall, if so, where. And so that is why it'll have to be watched very closely for the next probably 2 to 3 days. By the way, it's centered at 28 north, 77.6 west, and we'll keep you up to date on the changes. Within another about 2 hours, we'll get another update with a new center and perhaps even a difference in the winds. But at this time, we have not seen any changes in the hurricane watches and warnings for the U.S. They're all on the coast of Florida, hurricane watch, and then a smaller area with tropical storm warnings. And that's because it's centered just 180 miles off the coast, and by tomorrow it will be closer. The tropical storm force winds extend out 160 miles from the center. So we're likely to see those winds lashing the coast up toward Daytona Beach, up toward the Jacksonville area. And while it is not expected to make landfall in Florida, we will have some effects. Now, it looks like at this point, unless it changes its course, makes a course more of a to the left through the next few hours, or picks up some speed, we probably won't see the watches and warnings changed, at least for this evening. This is what I know you want to see. This is the forecast track. So from now through Monday, we expect to see it moving to the northwest, eventually changing, moving more northerly tomorrow, eventually to the northeast, paralleling the coast of the Carolinas, but still with the potential to make landfall. But it's too early to say when that will happen. At this point, it looks like the best bet is sometime on Tuesday, if it happens. So now back to the newsroom and on.
Susan Candiati. Susan, how's it going there?
Hello, Andrea. It has been sunny and breezy all day long, and forecasters are predicting seas of up to 12 to 15 feet and possible wind gusts of up to 40 to 50 miles per hour as the evening wears on in this area just south of Cape Canaveral. I am in a marina along the Indian River, along the Florida Intercoastal Waterway. In this marina, there are about 50 boats, and we are on one of them, joining boat owner Scott Kiesling. And this is a sailboat, about 30-footer, would you say?
33 feet.
What are your concerns?
I'm concerned for primarily other boats that aren't properly moored, owners that have not come down and checked and secured their vessels, mooring lines chafing through the night, just protecting your own assets. Plus, we'll be here all night making sure that doesn't happen, just taking a look at all the other boats, making sure they're safe.
Tell me about what you've done to secure your boat. For example, the lines.
Primarily is just being prepared. I've secured my boat, doubled up on all my lines, all my bow lines, and also I have a lot of good chafing gear in case lines do go and they do chafe through the night.
How would you assess your mood right now? Nervous?
Very nervous. I've been anticipating this storm for 2 days, watching all the reports. This is a new boat for me, and I'm very concerned about its safety.
About 35 years old, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Good luck to you this evening, Scott.
Thank you, Susan.
Now, Florida emergency management officials are closely monitoring the situation. They have put the National Guard on standby, but they are hoping that Hurricane Dennis will steer clear of Florida's coastline and that the state will be spared. Susan Candiati, CNN reporting live in Merritt Island.
Stay with CNN for the latest on Hurricane Dennis. We'll have live weather updates every half hour all weekend long.
Northwestward right now, about 6 miles per hour. We think it'll turn up a little more towards the north by this time tomorrow. The center this time tomorrow should be located somewhere off the northeast coast of Florida. And then this time Monday should be very close to the South Carolina coast. There are a couple of scenarios that could play out at that time. One is that it could recurve up towards the northeast and sort of skirt the coast of the Carolinas, or it could nearly stall again and remain very close to the southeastern coast for even a few days.
When a hurricane is moving this slowly, is that good news or bad news for residents?
Well, it is certainly different than Hurricane Hugo that hit South Carolina in 1989, and much different from Hurricane Fran that hit North Carolina in 1996. Those hurricanes are moving very rapidly and spread hurricane force winds well inland. which caused a lot of damage. If this is still slow moving as it gets near the coast of the Carolinas, the winds will not spread inland, but they'll have these battering waves on the coastal areas for an extended period of time. So on the coastal areas, this is probably not good news. It really depends, too, on how close the center of the hurricane gets to the coast.
At one point, we were told that one of the scenarios could be that it might just head back out to sea. Is that looking like a possibility to you at all?
That's a distinct possibility, but after this 2-day time period I'm talking about, as it gets close to South Carolina, it's still going to be very close to the Carolinas before it turns out to the northeast. So I think it's going to be, it certainly looks like it's going to be close enough right now that the folks up there in the Carolinas need to pay very close attention to the progress of this hurricane.
One of the risks, I think, when a hurricane is moving this slowly is that people tend to not really take it as seriously. Of course, in South Carolina, they, of course, experienced Hurricane Hugo 10 years ago, so maybe they are heeding the warning. But what about other areas?
Well, that's a good analogy. In fact, Hurricane Hugo, I remember 2 days before it made landfall in South Carolina, was a Category 2 hurricane, just like Dennis is right now. Dennis has plenty of time to stay over very warm water. It certainly does have some potential to strengthen. In fact, we are forecasting this to become a major hurricane, a Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale.
Well, as you said, and as Jill Brown said, this is one that we're going to have to watch over the next 2 to 3 days. Max Mayfield, we thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Andrea.
All right. Make landfall in the southeastern United States in the coming days. People in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas are bracing for the storm, which is now off the coast of Florida. At last report, the hurricane was about 270 kilometers east of Cape Canaveral, Florida. Dennis's top sustained winds have reached 201 kilometers per hour, and forecasters say it is still gaining strength.
The storm battered the northern Bahamas on Saturday, and forecasters fear it could strike Georgia and the Carolinas in the coming days. At last report, the hurricane was about 482 kilometers southeast of Charleston, South Carolina. Top sustained winds have reached 167 kilometers an hour. CNN's Brian Cabell looks at how those in the possible path of the storm are preparing.
Life appears normal in Charleston. Tourists enjoying the sights, the shopping, the southern hospitality. But look more closely and you'll see some people packing up, cutting short their vacations because of the threat of Hurricane Dennis.
I grew up in Florida, so I know what hurricanes are like, and I don't want a chance being around if it suddenly takes a turn and moves quicker than it's supposed to.
Hotels are taking a hit here. This one's dealing with 500 cancellations so far. Further south in Cocoa Beach, Florida, again the appearance of calm and relaxation on the beach. But some folks are preparing, just in case.
Well, we've already been through Aaron. That was enough. We already had enough damage. Hopefully, we were fortunate enough in that one to make it through.
On Tybee Island, Georgia, another good beach day. But residents have their eye on the weather.
I will be one of the first. When they say leave, I'm not going to be the brave soul and tough it out.
The problem on the North Carolina coast, as it is up and down the Atlantic, not enough hurricane supplies.
We ran low on gas cans, tarps, everybody getting ready in case they have damage.
They're getting ready, but they really don't know what to expect because the hurricane forecasters aren't sure either. They'll tell you in projecting Dennis's path in the next 3 days, they feel confident only about the next day and a half.
It's in the second day and a half that we're really concerned whether it will go inland or go back out to sea and hopefully miss everybody.
That would be fine with tourists and locals alike. But for now, they'll have to deal with the uncertainty of a slow-moving hurricane. Here in Charleston, where memories of Hurricane Hugo are still vivid, evacuations have not been called for so far. That could happen later in the weekend. Brian Cabell, CNN, Charleston, South Carolina.
Hurricane Dennis hits the Bahamas and moves on. We'll check in with the National Hurricane Center for the latest on Dennis.
Live from CNN in Washington, this is Late Edition with Wolf Blitzer.
It's noon in Washington, 9 a.m. in Los Angeles, 5 p.m. in London, and 8 p.m. in Moscow. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks for joining us for this 90-minute Late Edition. We'll get to our guests shortly, but first let's check in with CNN reporters covering the hour's top stories. We begin with Hurricane Dennis, which is continuing to move north through the Atlantic Ocean along the southeast coast of the United States. Orlin Sidney is in the CNN Weather Center where she's tracking Dennis. Orlin?
Wolf, thanks a lot. It is going to be an interesting afternoon for folks, let's say, from Georgia, but especially through south and into North Carolina, as we're looking at Dennis continuing now to move northward. The storm has taken a little bit more of a right turn, so it's heading just about due north and picking up a little bit of speeds, up to about 10 miles an hour currently. As we look at the very latest coordinates, that was the visible satellite picture I wanted to show you. The winds are up to 105 miles an hour. Some of those outer rain bands are starting to move onto the coast as well. We're seeing some rain from just about Cape Fear all the way down to Charleston, continuing southward to about Savannah. As we go through the afternoon, remember, a hurricane watch is in effect from Savannah up to Cape Hatteras, and a tropical storm warning is now in effect for the same area. So that means you could see tropical storm force winds there within the next 24 hours. Taking our map all the way into Wednesday morning. We're looking at a pretty good close clip, I think, to Cape Fear, maybe to Cape Hatteras, and then continuing on to the northeast. Looks like the storm is going to be pulling offshore as a cold front starts to pick it up and carries it out to sea, we hope, probably passing through Bermuda, or at least to the east of or west of Bermuda, we think, but pretty close scrape here along the coast. I would be advised you could see some very gusty winds as well as flooding rains across parts of the Outer Banks. Wolf?
Okay, Orla, Sydney, thanks for joining us. Residents and vacationers on the southeastern coast of the United States are preparing for the arrival of Dennis. CNN's Charles Ziwi is at North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Charles?
Wolf, right now here in North Myrtle Beach, the situation is really quite good, but look offshore. You can see, past these two little girls waving here, you can see a rather ominous-looking thunderstorm and rain band just offshore. As a matter of fact, the storm is about 240 miles from where I'm standing right now, 240 nautical miles. But the outer bands, the tropical force and gale force winds, are only about 75 miles off the beach. It's expected that the weather conditions here at North Myrtle Beach will go downhill all day today, and that perhaps sometimes during most of the day tomorrow. If the storm continues to pull away from the coast, that'll change, of course. But right now, they're still expecting gale force winds of maybe 50, 60 miles an hour along the beach here, torrential rains, and a storm surge of 2 to 4 feet across the beach. But that, again, may change if the storm continues to pull away. South Carolina emergency management officials have ordered just about everybody off the beach here, but you still see some people back there in the surf enjoying the day. There were hundreds of people out on the beach earlier in the day, about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. Officials came along, police came along and ordered everybody out of the water. There are dangerous riptides out there, big surf conditions, and that's expected to worsen during the day. Officials here have not ordered any mandatory evacuations, but the governor, Jim Hodges, here in South Carolina, has recommended that people living on the barrier islands, like the Isle of Palms, down near Charleston, and the little barrier islands along the coast, if they live on those barrier islands and if they live in low-lying areas, particularly in mobile homes, that they may want to consider moving to higher ground or moving inland, but there are no mandatory evacuations as we understand it here in South Carolina. Again, officials are saying they do not plan to order people off the beach. They're watching Dennis, hoping Dennis goes safely out to sea. Wolf?
Okay, Charles. Center in Miami, Florida. Joining us is the director of the center, Jerry Jarrell. Mr. Jarrell, thank you so much for joining us on Late Edition.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. We're fine over here. The question is, how worried should people along the east coast of the United States be right now?
Well, I think there's reason for optimism, but it's cautious optimism. We think the center is going to come up close to the coast and turn and go east, so we don't think it will spread hurricane force winds inland. But if we miss that turn a little bit, then it could, and we might have to change our watch to a warning with very little advance notice. So be ready, and if you're in one of those very vulnerable places, you probably ought to go ahead and move inland a little bit.
And the description of this hurricane, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's a slow mover. What precisely does that mean? What's the impact of a slow mover on the east coast of the United States?
Well, it's actually speeding up a little bit, but a slow mover means that it doesn't have much very strong steering, and any little force, in fact a force that we may not even be able to detect in the atmosphere, can change its motion. So they're fickle. They change their motions on a dime, and they're very hard to predict because of that.
And so as a result, you still can't say for certain where this hurricane will hit the land, if in fact it will hit the eastern shore of the United States. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
All right, what about the cold front that's coming in supposedly from the north? Is that going to affect the course of this hurricane?
Yeah, and that's what we're counting on to deflect it to the northeast. That's what we're counting on to change it from this northerly motion to one of easterly motion so it'll go along the coast.
And people who are watching this program in Bermuda right now, how worried should they be?
No, I don't think it's much of a concern to Bermuda. Once it clears Hatteras, then our next concern is probably New England, because we think it'll probably turn back to the north a little bit. And so even though that's several days away, that would be our next concern after that. Not Bermuda, I wouldn't think.
Last week, last Sunday, our viewers were watching Hurricane Brett as it came towards Texas. What's the major difference between what we're seeing with Hurricane Dennis versus Hurricane Brett of last Sunday?
Well, a couple of things. One, we're concerned about in our forecasting a turn to the left for Brett. For this one, it's a turn to the right, so it's just the opposite problem. And Brett was extremely strong, at least when it got up by the coast. We think it was a Category 4 hurricane there. This is a Category 2 hurricane, so it's not nearly the problem from that point of view. This may be a much more populated area, though, than where Brett finally went ashore over there.
And that would obviously make it much more dangerous if, in fact, it does hit land in the Carolinas around there somewhere. What about after Dennis? You're tracking some other potential hurricanes out at sea right now. What can we expect in the next few days and weeks?
Well, we do see a very vigorous-looking wave that has just emerged off Africa in the last 24 hours. That would look to be the next potential. Other than that, there are a couple of disturbed areas, one in the Caribbean, but it doesn't really show any signs of developing right now.
Okay, Jerry Jarrell, thank you.
Den zweiten großen Sturm der Saison. Gestern zog er über die nördlichen Bahamas hinweg, liegt jetzt über dem Atlantik vor der amerikanischen Südostküste und er wird immer stärker. Morgen dürfte Dennis Windgeschwindigkeiten von 210 Stundenkilometern erreicht haben. Es gilt Sturmwarnung von Georgia bis North Carolina. Die Menschen bereiten sich auf den Ernstfall vor. Johannes Böning berichtet.
Sie sind es fast schon gewohnt, die Küstenanwohner im Südosten der Vereinigten Staaten. Bretter holen, Häuser verbarrikadieren, Vorräte hamstern und dann warten darauf, dass der Hurrikan kommt und sein zerstörerisches Werk verrichtet. Wir haben unsere Einkäufe gemacht, gepackt. Wir können sofort aufbrechen, wenn wir müssen. Noch künden nur geballte Wolken vom nahenden Sturm. In der Nacht zog Dennis mit 170 Stundenkilometern über die Bahamas hinweg, richtete dort jedoch nur geringe Schäden an. Nun schiebt er sich die amerikanische Küste hoch Richtung South Carolina. So langsam, dass Wetterforscher fürchten, er könnte im Inneren an Geschwindigkeit noch zunehmen und Stärke 3 erreichen. Was das heißt, wissen die Bewohner noch gut. Vor 3 Jahren wütete Hurrikan Fran mit der gleichen Stärke über North Carolina. 17 Tote und 1 Milliarde Mark Schaden war damals die bittere Bilanz. Dass sich das wiederholt, halten Meteorologen zwar für unwahrscheinlich. Die Luftwaffe von South Carolina aber brachte vorsichtshalber schon mal ihre Flugzeuge in Sicherheit. Hurrikan Dennis hat jedoch auch Freunde. Die Surfer in Florida freuen sich über die ersten hohen Wellen dieses Jahr.
Hurricane Dennis continues its slow, steady march with bands of rain whipping the mid-Atlantic coast. The storm's final path remains unclear. This is skimming along the coastal Carolinas. Residents there are stocking up on emergency essentials, and many vacationers are headed home. The storm is churning just off the mid-Atlantic states, with top winds reaching 105 miles an hour. North Carolina officials have ordered evacuations from several outlying areas, including Ocracoke and Hatteras Islands, and farther south in New Hanover County. As the storm edged closer, North Carolina's governor declared a state of emergency and a state of disaster. In the Wrightsville Beach area, city officials imposed an 8 p.m. curfew. For the very latest on the projected path of Hurricane Dennis, we join Flip Spiceland at the CNN Weather Center. Flip?
Yes, indeed. We'll be looking at that path in just one moment. There is some good news in that, but it's not all good news because it is already so very close to the coastline that already in South Carolina anyway, wind gusts of close to 30 miles an hour and very heavy rainfall, even some very heavy thunderstorms being felt here. A tropical storm watch remains in effect in South Carolina, and now hurricane warnings in effect for the coast of North Carolina. Again, we'll get you up to speed on all of this and talk talk more about that forecast track. These are the latest coordinates as of 5 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time, about an hour ago. 31.5 north, 78.3 west if you are plotting the storm at home on your hurricane tracking map, and many people do. That places the storm 195 miles south of Wilmington. This is the first statement from the Hurricane Center that's giving the fix off of Wilmington, because the storm is now moving north and it is due south of Wilmington, so 195 miles away. Up till now, the fixes have been coming off of Charleston. Wind speed still at 105 miles an hour. Forecast calls for the storm to intensify. It's not over yet as far as growing in strength is concerned, and it's moving to the north at 13, moving rather quickly now, which would indicate it's being picked up by that trough of low pressure you've been hearing us talk about over the last several days. So, first of all, the warning and the watches. The tropical storm warning is in effect from Oregon Inlet northward to Chincoteague, Virginia. The hurricane warning is in effect from Oregon Inlet southward down to Little River Inlet. That's basically the coast of North Carolina. There is still a tropical storm watch in effect south of this, basically along the coast of South Carolina. It's down to Savannah, Georgia. Here is that forecast track, and let's talk about this a little bit. This is where it's located now, off the coast of South Carolina. It's moving to the north, slightly east of due north. It gets right to the coast and then takes that easterly turn out into the Atlantic, moving away. Don't give up on it even at that time. Now, it should move rather quickly over the next 12 to 48 hours, and then after 48 hours, it'll begin to slow down a little bit, because that same trough of low pressure that's turning it to the northeast will pull away from it and sort of leave it stranded here. So we still have to watch it even as late as Wednesday morning. More on this coming up later. Now back to the news.
Thank you, Flip. Charleston, South Carolina is near the southern end of the hurricane watch area. CNN's Brian Cabell is there with an update on the city's storm preparations. Brian?
Good afternoon, Andrea. The port here in Charleston has been shut down. Some shelters have been opened up. A number of tourists have left town, and hurricane planners are certainly still on their toes, but it's starting to look pretty good here. We are told maybe to expect winds in the range of 40 to 50 miles per hour later on tonight. Some occasionally heavy rains, which we've had so far this afternoon, and perhaps, they tell us, some isolated flooding.
We're below sea level in some areas, including the peninsula of Charleston and some of the outlying barrier islands. You know, we're concerned about, we don't have that many roads on and off the islands. And we got drawbridges, and we got to think about that.
As you might expect, tourists both here in Charleston and along the beaches of South Carolina are disappointed. They were hoping for some sun and some leisurely days along the beach. They are not facing that. Instead, they have rough weather and some huge waves. That's good for surfers. These waves out at Folly Beach, some 8 to 10 feet tall. But the surfers, or the tourists rather, they are trying to make the best of it.
We expected sun, but we knew that this was coming, but we made a decision to come anyway.
I'm too light complected to worry about the sun anyways.
Fishing was more
what I wanted to do.
And you're not going to be able to do that?
Doesn't look like it.
And it doesn't look like a hurricane either. There will be no evacuations here, none called for so far. We don't expect any whatsoever. There was a possibility they might be called for today. Best of all, it doesn't look like there will be a replay of Hurricane Hugo, which of course occurred almost 10 years ago to the day. That caused some $7 billion worth of damage and 21 deaths. Nothing like that. Dennis is going to pass us here on the coast, apparently. I'm Brian Cabell, CNN Live in Charleston, South Carolina.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center in Atlanta, and this is American Edition. Coming up, one environmentalist wants to put the focus on wildlife. We'll see how an array of outdoor cameras helps to keep an eye on Alaska's animals. We'll have that story in just a moment, but first a look at our top story. Hurricane Dennis is sweeping close to the Atlantic coastline. Gale force winds and tropical rains have been lashing North Carolina's barrier islands, and the storm's unpredictable movements are keeping residents and authorities guessing. CNN's Jeff Locke is in North Carolina, where he's been watching the weather and the preparations. He joins us now with more on the storm. Jeff?
Indeed, John, a place called Carolina Beach, North Carolina, where we have been for hurricanes before, but fortunately, this storm did not make landfall here, instead choosing to stay off the shore. But that, of course, does not mean that Carolina Beach and the rest of the North Carolina shore did not get pummeled. Let's take a live look out now to the Atlantic Ocean, which, believe it or not, is considerably quieter now than it was overnight, when this storm was not far offshore at all, and we were getting battered by the winds. Hurricane-force winds here as high as 89 miles per hour recorded. You know, we always look at a hurricane as an opportunity to communicate the power of nature to you. Others look at the hurricane as an opportunity for research. We spent the last 48 hours or so with just such a person.
Some nasty stuff getting ready to come on shore in Carolina Beach, I swear.
We are chasing a hurricane.
We'll get ahead of it, and we'll be on the north side of it right now.
Meet Mark Sudduth. He runs the Wilmington, North Carolina-based Hurricane Intercept Research Team.
Feel the wind?
His goal, get a piece of Dennis and enough information that can help the vulnerable Carolina coast better prepare in the future.
What is it that draws you to this?
This is something that builds like a holiday coming, like Christmas. You know it's coming. It's on the news. It's the talk of the town.
We set off in a green 96 Isuzu Rodeo, outfitted with GPS, roof-mounted anemometer, barometric pressure gauge, and computer-generated radar. Sudduth points us north from Charleston, trying to get close. At first, he's not hopeful. Then,
hurricane warning went up. Changes the ball game completely.
A team member tells him it's coming closer and faster than he thought. This is good.
Tell me some more. I've got goosebumps.
Sudduth determines Carolina Beach, North Carolina, is the best place to be.
Let's see what old Dennis is doing.
In a blackened beachfront condo, he fires up his radar to confirm.
Look at all that out over there, boy. That's got hurricane-force winds in it for sure.
Safe in the knowledge he is as close as he can be, we go out to survey the beach as the effects of Dennis begin to hit the shore.
Well, I'll tell you what, it smells like a hurricane. It looks like a hurricane. I'd have to say it's a hurricane.
It was a hurricane, at least a hurricane offshore. And to give you some indication of what it looked like when that hurricane came ashore, we've got some pictures that were taken by Mark Sudduth, the hurricane chaser. In fact, he found all of it that he wanted last night. Very, very difficult conditions. This community was blacked out for a while. Some of the transformers popped and power to the whole community went down at one point. We were in pitch darkness with, as we said, winds as high as about 90 miles an hour and one gust reported on a county anemometer at 100 miles per hour. So it was quite a difficult situation, one that it seems now has passed the North Carolina coast, although that hurricane remains out there, John. That's the latest from here. Back to you.
CNN's Jeff Flock on the scene of a storm for us once again. Thanks very much. Now for the very latest on Hurricane Dennis and the rest of the U.S. weather picture, we're joined by Femi Oke at the CNN Weather Center. Femi?
But you don't need me to tell you what is the main feature on our satellite picture today for North America. This is Hurricane Dennis. I'll get to that in just a little while. Let me just work my way across the United States. We can see here some showery activity just moving across the Rockies into America, over Central America as well. Some showers possible too. And down here, just by North Orleans, we have got some, New Orleans I should say, we have got some showery activity just swirling there, bringing some showery rain there too. Hurricane Dennis, just off the coast of the Carolinas. It's moving very slowly northeasterly direction. Let's have a closer look at the radar picture and we can really see what's going on. This is the eye of the hurricane. It's way off land at the moment, but its effects and influence are being felt all along the coast. If you're anywhere along here, you're going to see heavy rain, thunderstorms, and some pretty poor weather conditions. But where the weather is helping, we do have a northerly wind pushing much of that storm away from land. So we're hoping that will do its work. Let's have a closer look then at the forecast for the United States coming up. This is the cooler air heading into the United States from the western part of America. We could see some showers along there. Hopefully for the western fires as well, may just be a few showers, might help out the firefighters too. And as for Dennis, well, it's moving off to northeasterly direction. At the moment, it's around about 15 knots. Okay, let's have a look at temperatures around the world.
Hurricane Dennis has turned away from land for now. Dennis is still punishing North Carolina's Outer Banks with drenching rains and high winds, but it is cruising east-northeast away from the barrier islands at about 24 kilometers per hour. The hurricane has left thousands without power and flooded streets in the Outer Banks. The storm is expected to stall somewhere off the coast of North Carolina and Virginia. Here now with more on Hurricane Dennis and other weather news is Femi Oke at the CNN Weather Center. Hi, Femi.
Hello. I'm just looking at some of the latest news about Hurricane Dennis. Currently travelling at around about 95 miles an hour. That's the sustained winds within the hurricane, and it's moving. The actual hurricane is moving around about 18 miles an hour. So a close look at this satellite picture, I'll be able to explain a little bit more to you. We're seeing Hurricane Dennis just moving off towards the northeast. Over the next 12, maybe 24 hours, we're expecting it perhaps just to stay where it is a little bit on the stationary side. Let's have a closer look at the forecast then for North America. As we move the pictures on, we can see cooler air heading into Central America. Here's Dennis just over here, and it's not affecting temperatures too much, actually. Along this coast here, we're seeing temperatures in the 30s, so an awful lot of rain, but not particularly cool. Let's have a look at our next map. Into Central America, we are seeing cooler weather heading into Central America, into Argentina as well, seeing some rain there as well. Temperatures, well, very coolest temperatures we're seeing are down by the coast by Chile. Heading onwards into Europe, well, we're seeing some rain moving from Scandinavia into Central Europe. Thunderstorms possible as well for Madrid and also for Greece. Temperatures there were coolest in Scandinavia, where all that cloud and rain is. We're having a look at this tropical wave. At the moment, thunderstorms and rain, heavy rain, heading off into Atlantic. It may well be our next hurricane. We'll be watching that very carefully. And finally, just looking at those temperatures then for Africa. There we go, Nairobi at 23, Bahrain very hot, still in a heat wave for the Middle East at 38 Celsius. Here's a look at world temperatures around the globe.
CNN in Washington. This is Worldview. I'm Bernard Shaw. Judy Woodruff is off. Hurricane Dennis appears to be giving residents along the United States East Coast a break. Heavy rain and wind battered the North Carolina coast early Monday, but at this hour, this storm appears to be moving out to sea. At the moment, Dennis is packing 90-mile-per-hour winds and is moving east-northeast at 17 miles per hour, but forecasters say it could soon stall. Right now, there are hurricane warnings from Cape Lookout, North Carolina, to the Virginia border. A tropical storm watch extends farther up the Virginia coast. Before making its turn seaward, Dennis delivered a punch to coastal areas. CNN's Charles Ziwi reports from hard-hit Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
As Dennis swirled close to land, beachfront homes and scenic villages along the North Carolina coast were battered by hurricane-force winds and rain.
It's a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and we're going to get through it, no problem.
Flags were shredded and roofing peeled back. Boats were knocked off trailers and low-lying streets flooded, but most major highways remained open. Officials say damage so far has been minimal, limited to signs and power lines. Utility officials say more than 50,000 customers have lost power, some of it turned off intentionally as a precaution. While scores of tourists and residents evacuated, some residents, like Bob Crawley, stubbornly refused to leave. He even went out to get cigarettes during the height of the storm.
I never evacuate on that, unless there's a guy to Corey 4.
In nearby Beaufort, North Carolina, George Page and his wife weathered the storm in their historic waterfront home built in 1771. An old pecan tree was knocked down, but the house was unscathed.
I think we got to fare pretty good. I think everybody's in pretty good shape, well prepared for it.
Because the storm's strongest winds stayed well offshore, damage was limited, but beaches in North and South Carolina took a real beating. Erosion experts say North Carolina's more than 300 miles of beaches could lose up to 50 feet of sand in some places. A storm like Dennis, they say, can move up to 1 million cubic feet of sand per mile of beach. What happens next to Dennis? Forecasters say the storm could meander off the east coast for several days.
I'm now concerned about all the coast, and there's no real indication that it will get weaker while it's out there.
And forecasters say Dennis could even threaten New York City later in the week. Charles Ziwi, CNN, Atlantic Beach, North
Der
Carolina.
Hurrikan Dennis ist kurz vor der Südostküste der USA beigedreht. Die Küstenbewohner können aufatmen. Es blieb nur bei einigen stürmischen Ausläufern. Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von 155 Stundenkilometern sorgten die Stürme für heftige Regenfälle. Dennis nimmt nun Kurs auf das offene Meer. Meteorologen befürchten jedoch, dass der Hurrikan wieder landeinwärts ziehen und auf die Nordostküste treffen könnte.
At the CNN International Weather Center with all the weather. Femi.
Hello, Sonia. Well, the latest on Hurricane Dennis, as you said, is it was stationary. It is beginning to move slightly westwards. I will be able to show you that better on our satellite picture. If we have a look at the satellite, I'll be able to show exactly where Hurricane Dennis is sitting in the world. Here we are, just off the east coast of the United States of America. This is Hurricane Dennis just here. Now, if you have a look at our forecast map, we'll be able to see it was stationary. It has got an awful lot of power. Now, yesterday, just by Long Island, surfers were surfing on waves of 12 feet, which is all very well if you're surfing. If you live along this coastal area, you are going to see an awful lot of flooding and some gusty wind conditions as well.
Hurricane Dennis is drifting back toward the North Carolina-Virginia coast. This storm's 75-mile-an-hour winds and heavy rain continue pounding the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Forecasters say if Dennis continues on its current path, it will again hit Cape Hatteras. At this hour, Dennis is about 125 miles offshore, drifting to the west at about 3 miles an hour. A hurricane watch and tropical storm warning stretches along the coast from Cape Lookout, North Carolina, to Chincoteague, Virginia. Winds, Dennis returned to Hatteras Island, cutting it in half, with 14-foot waves and stranding some 5,000 people who defied orders to evacuate. The storm is drifting west at 5 miles an hour, about 100 miles from Cape Hatteras. Forecasters are saying this storm will probably linger off the coast for days, putting a damper on the start of the Labor Day weekend. Rough surf and riptides from Dennis has closed beaches to swimmers as far north as Cape Cod, Massachusetts. President Clinton has issued disaster declarations for areas of North Carolina due to this storm.
Coast for a week before making landfall along a barren stretch of islands off North Carolina Saturday. The storm dumped heavy rain across the eastern part of the state, causing power outages to thousands of homes. But there are no reports of major damage or injuries.
Hello, I'm Mari Ramos from the CNN International Weather Center, and this is Tropical Storm Floyd. Floyd still has winds of up to 70 miles per hour with higher gusts. It is moving to the west-northwest. There are some tropical storm warnings into some islands of the northern Leeward Islands. It is moving in that general direction, and the system is expected to become a hurricane. So all interested in this general area need to keep a close eye on the system in the next day or so, actually in the next few hours as it approaches the region. Now, turning to the U.S., we do have a strong cold front pushing through the eastern Great Lakes and reaching all the way down into Georgia. This is bringing heavy rain showers ahead of the front as it pulls all that moisture from the warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. So expect some heavier rain showers.
Uns einen tropischen Sturm an, der noch kein Hurricane ist, aber durchaus einer werden könnte. Und zwar dieser Sturm hat also schon im Prinzip eine ziemlich starke Wirbelstruktur. Und er zieht jetzt leicht nordwestlich und dürfte dann in den nächsten 72 Stunden westlich der westindischen Inseln liegen und dürfte dann möglicherweise auch schon Hurrikanstärke erreicht haben. Das war es erstmal für heute vom Wetter. Gleich gibt es Kulturzeit und da geht es um den Eklat über den Philosophen Peter Sloterdijk.
Wissenschaftler der NASA warnen gegenwärtig vor weiteren Hurrikans in der Karibik. Die zweite Hälfte der Hurrikansaison soll aufgrund der Wetterphänomene El Niño und La Niña stärker ausfallen als bisher erwartet. Grund dafür ist das derzeit sehr kalte Wasser über dem Pazifik, das die Frontalzone weit nach Norden verschoben hat. Das begünstigt die Entstehung und Ausbreitung der Wirbelstürme in der Karibik bis weit nach Norden. Denn erst durch die stärkeren Winde innerhalb der Frontalzone werden diese meist schwächer oder ziehen dann als kräftige Sturmtiefs über den Atlantik ostwärts.
Orland Sydney is in the CNN Weather Center with the latest on that. Orland?
Frank, that's correct. Floyd is doing both of those things, heading westward and strengthening. Now a Category 3 storm, expected to strengthen even more to a Category 4 storm on a scale of 5 by this time tomorrow. So think Andrew, think Hugo as far as the strength of this particular storm. And that's certainly some bad news, as it does look like it may make an assault on the eastern U.S. coast by middle of the week. Tropical storm warnings in effect now for the southeastern portion of the Bahamas. hurricane watch is in effect for the central Bahamas, and it looks like we may see a hurricane watch issued a little bit farther to the northwest later. Currently, the storm's 310 miles east-northeast of Grand Turks Island. The winds are 120 miles an hour, moving to the west at 12 miles an hour. Looking at now until early morning on Wednesday, we track the storm continuing through the Bahamas, and then it makes an approach to parts of Florida. It looks like the Cape Canaveral area is the most likely strike point today. That may change as the storm could head northward along the coast. Frank?
Orland, thanks very much. Back.
Hurricane Floyd is now a Category 4 storm. According to the United States National Weather Service, the hurricane has winds of 250 kilometers an hour. The intensification puts Floyd on a par with Hurricane Andrew, which killed 26 people and caused $25 billion worth of damage in South Florida some 7 years ago. A hurricane warning is in effect for most of the Bahamas Islands. As Hurricane Floyd gains momentum in the Atlantic Ocean, U.S. coastal authorities are bracing for a potential disaster. Gary Tuckman reports on the preparations that are underway in Florida.
Come here at the center. He's a very busy man.
Could you hold on 1 second? Okay. It's Billy Wagner.
Billy Wagner is responsible for the safety of a vulnerable community.
In the last 112 years, the Keys have been directly affected by 46 hurricanes, of which 24 of them have been major events, Category 3, 4, 5.
Wagner, who spends much of his time at the National Hurricane Center, is the Director of Emergency Management for the Florida Keys, one of the least safe places to be in the United States during a hurricane.
People have to remember in the Keys, it's not like living on the mainland and you move inland. There's no inland except the mainland.
The Florida Keys are a chain of islands 120 miles long, connected by 42 bridges, with only one exit road, which is 2 lanes wide for almost the entire way. Ask Keys residents how tough it is to drive to the mainland, even during good weather.
We have a saying in the Keys during tourist season, if you want to be on the other side of the street, you need to be born there. If it gets right there, and you have a full-fledged hurricane, I can assure you.
And that is Billy Wagner's dilemma. In case of a major hurricane, how do you get people evacuated safely?
Our first objective is to direct all the non-residents out of the Keys.
It has to be done in phases. After non-residents come people in hospitals and nursing homes, and then other residents are told to go. The most powerful hurricane to ever hit the United States hit the Keys in 1935. The Labor Day Category 5 storm killed more than 400 people in what was then a very lightly populated area. A memorial to those who died stands in the Keys town of Islamorada. The ashes of most of the victims in a crypt at the base of the memorial.
Billy Wagner's job is complex, but his message to Keys residents is quite basic. If a Category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane is coming your way, leave. And if not, you're on your own, because emergency officials are told to leave too.
Wagner fears many of the Keys' 80,000 residents would not leave. And he says, frankly, if a hurricane as powerful as 1992's Andrew made a direct hit on the Keys, the death toll would be calamitous.
I'd say in excess of 5,000 in the lower Keys. And that's might even be an underestimate.
And that is why this 19-year veteran feels the weight of his community on his shoulders. Gary Tuckman, CNN, Islamorada, Florida.
Out Hurricane Floyd, you can see this is a powerful hurricane, very well formed. You can see very good outflow here, and of course an eye. As of the 5 a.m. Eastern Time advisory, the system had winds of 155 miles per hour with higher gusts and continued that track to the west. And that is exactly what has residents and actually officials along the Florida's east coast somewhat worried about the system, because even though we're expecting the system to continue that track to the west and then begin to turn northwest, it may already be too close to Florida and affect it directly. Already the Bahamas receiving almost the full brunt of the storm. You can see these rain bands right here, right over the area, experiencing tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds. And also on the backside of the system, heavy rainfall reported over the Virgin Islands, the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands, also over Puerto Rico and also over the Dominican Republic. Let's take a look at the big picture now of the system. And here it is. You can see it spinning around right right along and moving to the west. So, of course, everyone along the southeastern coast of the U.S. should pay very close attention to the system in the next 12 to 24 hours. The system, a powerful Category 4 hurricane. Now, elsewhere in the U.S., we do have a strong cold front pushing through the Great Lakes region. This one bringing cooler temperatures, actually some fall and winter-like temperatures, already some frost advisories in effect along northern portions of the upper tier of the U.S. Here's the cold front. As this system pushes through, you'll see cooler temperatures and actually some rain along the southeastern U.S. and all the way into the eastern Great Lakes and fair weather along the east coast of the U.S. Now,
ein Hurrikan die Ostküste der USA. Diesmal nähert sich der Wirbelsturm Floyd. Experten haben ihn als extrem gefährlich eingestuft. Er bewegt sich derzeit über die Karibik auf Florida zu. Wie die Menschen sich auf den Sturm vorbereiten, zeigt Eckart Tollkühn.
Das Heulen elektrischer Schraubenzieher. Wie immer künden sie das drohende Unheil an. Die Leute verbarrikadieren ihre Häuser in der Hoffnung, dass Floyd nicht zum Killerorkan wird, wie Hurrikan Andrew vor 7 Jahren. Denn dann helfen auch keine Bretter mehr. Andrew hatte die Stärke 4 und hinterließ eine Wüste der Zerstörung an der Südspitze Floridas. Floyd hat schon jetzt die Stärke 4 und wird beim Landfall vermutlich 5 erreichen. Das bedeutet ungeheure Zerstörungskraft. Schon jetzt tobt der Sturm mit einer inneren Geschwindigkeit von 250 Stundenkilometern und Böen bis zu 300. Mitte der Woche soll er auf Land treffen. Wo, das weiß niemand genau. Und deshalb herrscht Angst in ganz Florida. Wir sind auf das Schlimmste gefasst. Im Hurricane Center von Miami. Die Wetterfrösche versuchen, den Kurs von Floyd zu berechnen. Doch trotz aller Technologie, trotz der Forschungsflieger, die sich bis ins Auge des Sturms vorwagen, die Genauigkeit der Vorhersage lässt immer noch zu wünschen übrig. Sie ist doch nicht präzise genug. Deshalb gehen wir auf Nummer sicher und geben Sturmwarnungen für große Gebiete aus. Die Hurrikansaison, sie geht offiziell von Juni bis November. Doch in der ersten Hälfte herrschte in diesem Jahr sozusagen die Ruhe vor dem Sturm. Nun geht es Schlag auf Schlag. Erst Dennis, Cindy, Emily, jetzt Floyd und Gert ist schon im Anmarsch. Dieses Kreuzfahrtschiff liegt scheinbar sicher im Hafen von Miami. Doch morgen wird es auslaufen wie geplant. Draußen droht weniger Gefahr, denn die neuen Schiffe sind so schnell, dass sie jedem Hurrikan davonfahren.
Coast of the United States, and weather forecasters say it's on the verge of becoming a Category 5 storm, which means it is capable of causing extreme damage. People across the U.S. state of Florida are taking no chances. Over the weekend, many stocked up on emergency supplies. Many Floridians still remember the destruction caused by Hurricane Andrew in 1992. That storm caused an estimated $25 billion in damage. So where exactly is Hurricane Floyd? Where is it headed? And how fast will he get there? For answers to those questions and the rest of the world weather picture, we turn now to Femi Oke at the CNN World Weather Center. Femi?
Thank you very much, John. I am plotting the coordinates of Hurricane Floyd at the moment. We have 5 categories of hurricane. Floyd is Category 4. If you come a little closer to the screen, you'll be able to see exactly where it is and where it's heading. Now, the Bahamas looks like they're going to get a pretty much direct hit. The most powerful part of any hurricane is this little bit here, this front quadrant, the front right bit, and it's the spiral bands that cause an awful lot of damage. Now, it looks like the Leeward Islands are still getting some wet weather and some thunderstorms, but a lot of that is just high-level cloud. It's this section here that we should be worried about as it heads in a northwesterly direction. Let's have a closer look then to see what a Category 4 hurricane actually means. We're looking at winds of 210 to 249 kilometers per hour, a storm surge of 13 to 18 feet. That means 18 feet above the normal tide level. Mobile homes could be destroyed, trees and signs blown down, and if you're anywhere lower than 10 feet above sea level, you should really be worried.
Shopping lists in parts of Florida, the state preparing for a possible onslaught by Hurricane Floyd. A mandatory evacuation order has been issued. Tens of thousands of people who live in coastal areas of Brevard County. That includes Barrier Islands, Cocoa Beach, and Cape Canaveral. Meanwhile, NASA is hoping 4 space shuttles will be safe in hangars that are not designed to handle wind speeds as high as those currently being stirred up by Floyd. Now, for the latest on Floyd and the rest of the U.S. weather picture, here's Femi Oke at the CNN International Weather Center. Femi?
Thanks very much, John. I have got a bird's eye view of Floyd at the moment, and this is it. It's these spiral bands we should be most aware of and cause most dangers, and the front right-hand part of the hurricane as well, as it heads in a northwesterly direction. Now, this looks like it's a second hurricane, but it is not actually. It's the result of this hurricane here, and we're also seeing cloud and thunderstorms and rain also in this middle section. If I just move about 4 or 5 days behind it, we have Hurricane Gert. Now, Hurricane Gert is actually making quite good progress. The reason being is that once one hurricane has cleared a path, the second one has a really good way of actually getting through, a bit like an American football player, getting right through down the line, and the second one kind of pushes in through behind it. Let's have a look then. This is the forecast for what a hurricane might be doing over the next few days. It's a forecast, I have to say this, so if you're living in this area, do be aware of it. It is heading in that northwesterly direction. Now, my colleague who used to live in Miami was telling me that Miami is about 2 foot above sea level in some parts. Now, for a Category 4 hurricane, you really need to be around about 10 foot above sea level to be really, really safe. So it gives you some kind of indication of where you need to be heading if that hurricane is coming towards you. Here's our weather for the rest of North America. This boundary here is very important. It may just manage to push Floyd away, but I suspect Floyd is just going to be that little bit too strong. Here's our temperatures then for North America, and that forecast moving through. We've got cooler air coming down and cooler, dry air in this high pressure area, and our temperatures there you can see.
From CNN in Washington, this is Worldview. I'm Bernard Shaw.
And I'm Judy Woodruff. 500 miles wide, packing 155-mile-an-hour winds, Hurricane Floyd is threatening the eastern United States. The Category 4 hurricane is capable of, quote, catastrophic damage. A state of emergency has been declared in Florida. Valerie Voss is tracking the storm in the CNN Weather Center. Valerie? Well, Judy, you know how they say that one picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, this is the picture. Look at the eye, the size of this hurricane as it moves quite resolutely through the Bahamas now and toward the coast of Florida. These are the 5 p.m. Statistics from the National Hurricane Center. 425 miles east-southeast of Miami. Winds right at the breakoff point, Category 4 to Category 5. Moving west at 16 miles an hour. You take a look at this. Hurricane warnings now in effect from Florida City up to Brunswick, Georgia. The Hurricane Center says that the center of this storm will be within 50 to 100 miles from the east coast of Florida in the next 24 to 36 hours. And they also say that hurricane force winds stretch out as much as 125 miles. The forecast track uncertain, but in the general direction of the southeastern U.S. Bernie?
Thanks very much, Valerie. At the Kennedy Space Center, as elsewhere in Florida, storm preparations are underway, but there are limits to what can be done. And for that part of the story, we go to CNN's John Zarrella in Hollywood, Florida. John?
Bernie, you know, and as this powerful hurricane continues moving westward and not making that northerly turn that forecasters are all expecting it does, the level of anxiety in South Florida is growing by the hour. Here at the Home Depot in Hollywood all day long, people have been taking out cartloads of plywood to put up on their windows. They've been taking out batteries and flashlights and everything imaginable to help to secure their homes as best they can against this very, very powerful hurricane. And sometimes they've been stopping to watch the television sets throughout the store to see exactly what's going on with the updates on the hurricane. Not just here, all over the state, all up and down the east coast of Florida, preparations underway. Certainly at the Kennedy Space Center, serious concerns at the Kennedy Space Center. The space shuttles are in what are called OPFs, Orbiter Processing Facilities. They are only built to withstand 105-mile-an-hour winds. Concerns if they should take the direct hit from that storm there. A little south at the Canaveral Air Force Station, there are 4 rockets on the launch pad. There's a Delta rocket, a Titan rocket, a couple of other rockets, and those rockets contain military payloads and commercial satellites. There is concern there as well. Only 105 mile an hour is all those that they are wind loaded for, those gantries. So very serious problems, potential problems all up and down the east coast of Florida from this very monster hurricane. And of course, fresh in everyone's minds, just 7 years ago, it was Hurricane Andrew that plowed through South Florida, South Dade, Homestead, $25 billion worth of damage, the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. It is Andrew, of course, that when people start to compare it to Floyd, if you took perhaps a $50 or a silver dollar and you laid it down on a table and then you put a dime over the top of it, Hurricane Andrew would be the dime, and that $50 or silver dollar would be Hurricane Floyd. That is how massive this storm is. So no one here is taking this lightly, and really a growing sense of anxiety in South Florida as the storm continues westward. This is John Zarrella reporting live from Hollywood, Florida.
US-Bundesstaates Florida sind mehr als 500.000 Menschen auf der Flucht vor dem Hurrikan Floyd. Gouverneur Jeb Bush hat den Notstand ausgerufen und die Nationalgarde mobilisiert. Die Bewohner der Küstengebiete sicherten ihre Häuser und legten Notvorräte an. Floyd, schon der 6. Hurrikan dieser Sturmsaison, wird als noch gefährlicher eingestuft als der Wirbelsturm Andrew, der 1992 Florida verwüstet hatte. Floyd ist vergangene Nacht mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von 250 Kilometern pro Stunde über die Inselgruppe der Bahamas gerast.
Biggest storm seen in years heads for the eastern coast of the United States. We have all the details. Stay with us. One of the biggest hurricanes seen for years is battering the Bahamas. Hurricane Floyd has been producing winds of 250 kilometers an hour as it moves through the islands. There are no reports of casualties so far. Journalist Jerome Sawyer spoke to us earlier from the capital of the Bahamas, Nassau.
Well, at this hour, Hurricane Floyd is headed to an island called Cat Island, which is in the central Bahamas. It's expected to pass over there about 2 a.m. our time, Tuesday morning. Then it heads to Nassau, where I am. We're expecting hurricane conditions here about 7 a.m. this morning. It's going to pass 30 miles to the east of where I'm located. Right now, the storm is still packing winds of about 155 miles per hour. It's still a Category 4 hurricane. They do not expect much change in strength in the next 24 hours, which is probably the best news that we've heard all day.
Well, Floyd is also heading towards the U.S. state of Florida, and authorities there have ordered more than 2 million people to evacuate coastal areas ahead of the storm's arrival. There are fears the storm could get even stronger as it moves towards the U.S. coast. CNN's John Zarella looks at how people are preparing for the arrival of Floyd.
In Cocoa Beach, people are boarding up. Those on the barrier islands have been told to evacuate.
This is the first time I've ever heard everybody say, usually they just want to ride it out and, you know, hang out or party, but not this time. I think people are serious.
In Miami, boats are being hauled out of the water. In Hollywood at the Home Depot, the line is 60 deep to purchase plywood. In Tallahassee, the governor declares a state of emergency and puts this storm in harsh perspective.
We all remember Hurricane Andrew and the damage it caused to South Florida in 1992. Hurricane Floyd is almost 3 times the physical size of Andrew, 3 times.
Because of the Andrew experience 7 years ago, there's a heightened level of anxiety in South Florida every time a storm threatens. But still, there is that last-minute rush. Grocery store checkout lines are packed. Shelves are emptied. Cars line up to fill up. And all along the Florida East Coast, residents are doing what they can to prepare.
Being born and raised in South Florida, I know what hurricanes are, can do for you. You can prepare for them, but you can only do so much.
At the Home Depot, as the last-minute buying frenzy continues, customers are drawn to television sets broadcasting the latest advisories and advice.
I do think you need to prepare tonight.
But so far, they haven't heard what they're hoping to hear, that Floyd has turned away. And there is a realization with a storm this big and this powerful that you just do what you can and pray for the best. John Zarella, CNN, Hollywood, Florida.
Well, we're going to get the very latest on that enormous storm. We're joining Guillermo Arduino at the CNN Weather Center. Guillermo, what can you tell us now?
Thank you, Charlotte. Good morning again. And here you see the scary look of this Hurricane Floyd, very strong, as the report was saying, 3 times larger than Andrew in 1992. As you see, it's going now west-northwest. So it changed its path. It used to be on a westerly path. Now it's going west-northwest. Let's see some images that we have. And I want to point out that it's Category 4. That means that extreme damages are expected. And we are talking about flooding, which is the most dangerous phenomenon, strong winds, high sea waves, storm surge, and heavy rain will be associated with it, of course. And we can talk about the effects of the hurricane, particularly over the Bahamas, as you see in this graphic. Storm surge flooding of 4.5 meters to 6 meters above normal tide levels. This is very dangerous. Large and dangerous battering waves and locally heavy rains, 200 to 250 millimeters. Now, in the Floridian coast, if the center reaches the coast, it will be a flooding of 1.5 meters to 3 meters above normal tide levels. This is very dangerous. Now we have to talk about the coordinates, and the latest information arrived at 2 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time from the National Hurricane Centers. These are the coordinates if you're interested to follow it with a map. 426 kilometers east-southeast of Miami, Florida, now on a west-northwest track at 22 kilometers an hour, a maximum sustained winds, as you said before, 250 kilometers per hour.
Hat in El Salvador schwere Verwüstungen verursacht. 4 Menschen sollen ums Leben gekommen sein. Tausende mussten ihre Häuser verlassen, um sich in Sicherheit zu bringen. Viele Flüsse, darunter der Rio Lempa, der größte des mittelamerikanischen Landes, sind über ihre Ufer getreten. Im US-Bundesstaat Florida fürchtet die Weltraumbehörde NASA wegen des nahenden Wirbelsturms um ihre Raumfähren. In der Küstenregion wurde der Notstand ausgerufen.
Der letzten Jahre vor. Der Wirbelsturm Floyd tobt zurzeit mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von 250 Stundenkilometern über den Bahamas und wird die US-Küste voraussichtlich morgen erreichen. Der Gouverneur von Florida rief den Notstand aus und mobilisierte die Nationalgarde. Floyd wird als gefährlichster Wirbelsturm seit Hurrikan Andrew eingestuft, der 1992 den Süden Floridas verwüstet hatte.
14. September, hier ist das RTL-Mittagsjournal mit Katja Burkhardt.
Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen zu Punkt 12. Über Florida braut sich großes Unheil zusammen. Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von bis zu 250 Stundenkilometern rast Hurrikan Floyd auf den Sonnenstaat zu. Schon jetzt wird dem Wirbelsturm der Stärke 4 bis 5 zugerechnet. Die Kategorie 5 ist die bisher stärkste, die jemals bei einem Hurrikan gemessen wurde. Hunderttausende sind auf der Flucht über die Angst vor dem Hurrikan, berichtet Jörg Schreier.
Sie haben so harmlose Namen und die Zerstörungskraft einer Atombombe. Dies sind Aufnahmen vom August 1992, als Hurrikan Andrew über den US-Bundesstaat Florida fegte. Damals starben 46 Menschen. An manchen Orten hinterließ er nichts, einfach nichts. Floyd soll noch viel gewaltiger werden. Wir erinnern uns alle an die verheerenden Schäden durch Andrew. Floyd ist 3-mal größer, 3-mal. Mehr als 500.000 Bürger in Florida sind aufgefordert, ihre Häuser zu verlassen. Endlose Karawanen von Autos ziehen über die Highways. Floridas Regierung hat den Notstand ausgerufen. Die Nationalgarde ist mobilisiert. Die noch da sind, rechnen mit dem Schlimmsten, vernageln ihre Häuser, bringen alles in Sicherheit, was ihnen lieb und teuer ist, und wissen doch, dass diese Vorbereitungen gegen die Gewalt des Sturmes möglicherweise völlig vergebens sind. Chaos in den Supermärkten. Mit Hamsterkäufen wollen sich die Bewohner für den Fall wappnen, dass die Lebensmittelversorgung zusammenbricht. Batterien für Taschenlampen sind fast ausverkauft, genauso wie Benzin. Viele Tankstellen haben bereits geschlossen. Erste Flüge nach Florida wurden gestrichen. Auch Kai Eichberg rechnet mit dem Schlimmsten. Der Deutsche lebt seit 7 Jahren in Florida, hat die zerstörende Wirkung von Andrew noch erlebt. Jetzt ist das Haus mit Brettern vernagelt, alles Zerbrechliche verpackt und das Auto vollgetankt.
Deshalb sind wir jetzt ein bisschen nervös und haben die Sachen zusammengepackt. Wir haben jetzt, wie man so sagt, Wasser und Batterien und alles Mögliche mit eingepackt und werden jetzt westfahren.
Nach deutscher Zeit morgen früh um 6 Uhr soll Floyd die Küste Floridas erreichen. Meteorologen halten es aber auch für möglich, dass der Hurrikan noch etwas nach Norden abdreht und damit die Ostküste entlang zieht. Dabei wird der Sturm immer gewaltiger, hat inzwischen über 400 Kilometer Durchmesser. Windgeschwindigkeiten von 250 Stundenkilometern sind bereits gemessen. Ein Ausläufer des Hurrikans hat vor wenigen Stunden die Bahamasinsel San Salvador überquert und schwere Schäden und Überflutungen angerichtet. Genaueres ist noch nicht bekannt. Wenn Floyd seinen bisherigen Kurs beibehält, liegt auch das Raumfahrtzentrum NASA genau im Zentrum der Wirbel. Experten rechnen mit schlimmen Verwüstungen. Im Moment ist es noch relativ ruhig an Floridas Küste, ruhig und gespannt. Viele sind geflohen, doch es gibt einige, die der Naturgewalt trotzen wollen und in der Brandung an den gesperrten Stränden surfen, dabei die starken Wellen nutzen, die Vorboten des Hurrikans.
250 kilometers per hour, so it is a powerful system. On this track, it will be approaching the coast of southern Florida first and bringing rain in the next, probably in the next few hours already, as you can already see some of these rain bands approaching the region. So of course, all plans need to be rushed to completion right along this boundary. Now, we'll talk more about the system during American Edition.
Hello, I'm Anand Naidu at the CNN Center. Welcome to American Edition. Coming up, the southeastern United States braces as Hurricane Floyd draws closer. And a strike. Our top story, Hurricane Floyd is hitting the Bahamas with heavy rains and pounding surf, with winds of up to 250 kilometers an hour. The storm is making its way across the Caribbean towards the southeastern United States. The Atlantic coast of the United States could get the worst of the storm. Forecasters say Floyd is on the verge of becoming a Category 5 storm capable of mass destruction. The states of Florida and Georgia have ordered more than 2 million people to evacuate the Atlantic shoreline. We go now for more on the weather to CNN's Marie Ramos.
Thanks, Anand. And this is indeed a powerful storm that we are watching very closely. Hurricane Floyd, as you said, has maximum sustained winds of 250 kilometers per hour. That is right at the threshold of becoming a Category 5 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. What does this mean? We'll talk more about that in just one moment. 250 kilometers per hour is about 155 mile-an-hour winds sustained. That's right along the center, and those strong winds stretch out, if you could imagine this, for about 125 miles from the center, so it is quite intense. Even if the center remains offshore, you could experience hurricane's force winds on the shoreline, and if it stays right on shore, the eye, more inland, you'll experience, at least 100 miles inland, you'll experience those hurricane force winds. So it is very, very serious. Let me show you the latest satellite image when we put it into motion. The center of the storm right now, it's about 290 miles east-southeast of Miami. As it continues to push in that generally west with a little bit of a north kind of a turn, it should begin to see some rain into the metropolitan areas of Miami-Dade County and Fort Lauderdale right about you know, and then just next couple of hours or so, around 8 or 9 Eastern time. So we'll be watching this fairly closely. This is the trough that we've been talking about that we're hoping will help push the hurricane to the north. If it pushes it to the north, good luck for Florida, which is actually very good news for Florida, but bad news up along the coast of the Carolinas and possibly even Georgia. There are hurricane watches and hurricane warnings posted all along those regions. And let me show you a Category 4. This is what a Category 4 can do. Extreme damage, winds of up to 249 kilometers per hour, which is right where we are with this system, right at 249, 250. Storm surge 13 to 18 feet above normal, and extensive damage to windows, roofs, and remember, you could be cut off from the mainland or from the escape routes 3 to 5 hours before the system hits land. A Category 5, all that plus all of these things that you see right here. Now, let's take a look at your forecast for North America.
Yep, certainly dominating the news. Forecasters say that Floyd is on the verge of becoming a Category 5 storm capable of mass destruction. The states of Florida and Georgia have ordered more than 2 million people to evacuate the Atlantic shoreline. CNN's Marshall Walton now explains why a storm like this can be so devastating.
Forecasters are now uttering Hurricane Floyd's name in the same breath as an infamous storm early this decade.
It is now stronger and larger than Hurricane Andrew.
Andrew caused $25 billion damage and left 160,000 homeless. A Category 4 storm, it caused extreme damage. Mobile homes destroyed, escape routes cut off with major flooding. In 1971, engineer Herbert Saffir and hurricane expert Robert Simpson designed a scale to rate a hurricane's intensity, from the minimal damage of a Category 1 at 74 to 95 miles an hour to the catastrophe of a Category 5 with winds of more than 155 miles an hour. A Category 5 storm hit the Florida Keys in 1935. The only other Category 5 to make U.S. landfall was Camille. In 1969, it killed more than 250 people along the Gulf Coast and in Virginia. Category 5 means roofs collapse on homes and industrial buildings. Massive evacuations are needed, and there's a deadly storm surge. Across Florida, residents are preparing for whatever level of intensity Floyd might bring. The area closest to the eye wall, is the most violent part of the storm. But winds are just the first part of the damage equation. 9 of 10 people killed in hurricanes are killed by the waters of the storm surge. Adding more to the devastation, tornadoes that are spawned by the storm. Those in the paths of these storms should not try to outwit them.
If you wait until you know that the forecast is wrong, you waited too late.
There's always the chance Floyd could change course and head to the Gulf of Mexico or up the East Coast toward the Carolinas, even New England. Marsha Walton, CNN.
Floyd is moving across the Caribbean towards the southeastern United States. High winds from the hurricane are expected to hit the Miami area within the next 2 to 3 hours. Floyd is moving west-northwest with winds of more than 250 kilometers an hour. The storm is making its way across the Bahamas. CNN's Frank Buckley joins us from Freeport on Grand Bahama Island with an update. Frank.
Relitza, winds have picked up as we approach daylight here on Grand Bahama Island, but they are still at the tropical storm force. That is less than 74 miles per hour. The local weather office tells us it's gusting to 60 miles per hour here. However, the winds have been strong enough throughout the islands to cause power outages, specifically in Nassau, on New Providence, and on the island of Abaco. More of a concern right now, however, are the islands of San Salvador and Cat Island. The Emergency Operations Center has not heard from either and has not been able to make contact with either island for the past 7 hours. Here on Grand Bahama Island, we are directly in the expected path of Floyd. Shelters are open for local residents. 6 were open last night, overnight. 7 more will open this morning. They are capable of handling some 4,000 of the island's 45,000 residents. Right now, about 140 people are in those shelters. There are some scattered power outages, and minor flooding is reported in some areas here. Later today, however, we are expected to experience much more serious conditions. Relita?
And Frank, speaking of those more serious conditions, I was reading that the hurricane is expected to cause surges of up to 20 feet. What does this mean for those islands?
What it means is that specifically on the island that we're on, for example, Grand Bahama, a Red Cross official told me last night that about the highest point of elevation here on this island is about 40 feet above sea level. So when you have a 20-foot storm surge, that is the leading edge of the hurricane, and that water simply washes over the shore and would wash over anything that was in its way. We are in the area known as Xanadu Marina, where there are boats that are still moored here in the marina. There's a good chance in past hurricanes that I've covered, some of those boats may leave the waters and end up on shore. That's the kind of thing that you'll see physically. Perhaps more seriously is what happens to people who are in residences that are right along the shore. They become completely flooded out.
90 Florida schwer verwüstet. Floyd halten die Meteorologen für gefährlicher. Auf der Hurricane-Skala ordneten sie ihn in Kategorie 4 ein, das ist die zweithöchste Stufe. Grund für die NASA, auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral Alarm auszulösen. Die 14.000 Beschäftigten sollen sich auf ihre Evakuierung vorbereiten. Die Schutzvorkehrungen laufen auf Hochtouren. Inzwischen hat Floyd zwar leicht in Richtung Nordwesten gedreht und könnte, wenn er diesen Kurs beibehält, noch von Florida wegziehen. Dennoch rief der Gouverneur vorsorglich den Notstand aus und mobilisierte die Nationalgarde. Tausende Menschen wurden bereits ins Landesinnere gebracht. Aber möglicherweise bleibt Florida doch noch verschont vom Hurricane Floyd.
Area right here, which is where we expect to see the strongest winds. Typically in a hurricane, this would be the area where you see the strongest winds pass right over that area. So they need to keep very safe as we move into the next few hours. Right now, tropical storm force winds. This is very important. Tropical storm force winds extend out some 490, almost 500 kilometers from the center. So, this system is, far away from them, and they're already receiving it. And that is why in the next hour or so, as the system moves closer, you will begin to see tropical storm force conditions also over portions of South Florida, including Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Depending how close this system actually gets to land will be the key in the next few hours, actually, since the system is already so close to land, and that is why this forecast track is so important. That expected turn to the north, will it happen? When will it happen? Well, we begin to see a slight shift already happening across this area, and I want to show you also this one more satellite image in just one moment. There we go. Hurricane Floyd only 300 kilometers southeast of Freeport, so already clearly in that tropical storm force field. The hurricane force winds, those extend out some 125 miles, almost 200 kilometers from the center, and those winds right now are up to 250 kilometers per hour, so clearly a Category 4 storm, nearly a Category 5. The damage that we can expect from a storm like this could be actually very extensive, we could say. Storm surge up to 18, possibly more, especially in low-lying areas, and particularly where the eye makes landfall, like very near this island right here that I believe is Eleuthera. You may see very, very damaging conditions here with buildings that could get damaged extensively as we move through the day. So stay tuned.
Eine genaue Voraussage über Route und Stärke ist trotz aller Elektronik noch immer nicht möglich. So blieb der Hurricane Andrew tagelang über dem Atlantik, bevor er am 22. August 1992 Kurs auf Miami nahm.
Um 2 Uhr früh am Samstag rief der Chef vom Dienst im Hurricane Center an. Er sagte mir, dass der Sturm angefangen habe, nach Westen zu drehen, wie wir schon geahnt hatten. Und er sagte, dass der Sturm an Stärke zugelegt habe. Auch dies hatten wir vorausgesagt. Aber er teilte mir auch mit, dass die Vorwärtsgeschwindigkeit des Systems um 3,5 Kilometer in der Stunde schneller geworden sei. Ich wusste in diesem Moment, dass wir dadurch 24 Stunden verloren hatten. Zum Schluss kam der Sturm sogar fast 48 Stunden früher als erwartet. In fact, we lost closer to 48 hours.
Der Nachmittag des gleichen Tages. Nach über 60 Jahren wird wieder ein tödliches Auge über Miami ziehen. Nur die wenigsten in der Stadt haben Erfahrung mit einem Hurricane. Sie tun das, was man bei einem Hurricane zunächst immer tut: Scheiben absichern, damit sie nicht wie Geschosse durch die Gegend fliegen. Noch ahnen die Bewohner nicht, dass Andrew ganze Straßenzüge ausradieren wird. Zeitungen und Fernsehen veröffentlichen detaillierte Listen über die dringend notwendigen Lebensmittelvorräte für die Tage danach, wenn nichts mehr gehen wird. Kein Strom, kein Wasser, keine Tankstelle, nichts wird funktionieren, egal wie stark der Hurrikan ist. Aber die offizielle Warnung des Nationalen Hurrikanzentrums lässt auf sich warten. Nicht ohne Grund.
Die durchschnittlichen Kosten für die Warnung eines Küstenstreifens, das sind rund 500 Kilometer, betragen etwa 80 Millionen Mark, wenn wir diese Warnung 24 Stunden vorher bekannt geben. Wir könnten auch 72 Stunden vorher warnen, aber da müssten wir die halbe Golfküste alarmieren. Dann würden die Kosten bei etwa einer halben Milliarde Mark liegen. Noch dazu haben wir die Evakuierungszeiten fast überall unter 24 Stunden reduziert. Und 24 Stunden zuvor haben wir auch eine ziemlich genaue Voraussage über den Verlauf des Sturmes.
Vorwarnung, das war nicht immer selbstverständlich.
Of all the signals of the sea, none turns the faces of hardy sailors more grim than the flags that spell hurricane warning. One morning late in September 1938, the dread signals swung aloft along the Florida coast. Up from the West Indies, cradle of hurricanes, moved the Terror, a pit of low atmospheric pressure into which the air rushed from all directions to form a whirling, shrieking vortex of high wind and heavy rain. Hurricane! The Coast Guard watched it warily as it moved northward, paralleling the coast. That night it was off the Carolinas. Next morning...
Halten wir diesen alten Film kurz an und zeigen, wie es tatsächlich beim Hurrikan von 1938 ablief. Die Hafenstadt San Juan auf der Insel Puerto Rico spürte als erste am 18. September 1938 den Hurrikan, der sie in den Morgenstunden streifte. Die Insel blieb zwar vom tödlichen Auge verschont, dennoch gab es Verwüstungen. Der Hurrikan, der Afrika am 4. September als ein starkes Regengebiet verlassen hatte, zog in Richtung Florida weiter. Noch am selben Tag gab das Wetterbüro Warnungen für Florida aus. Einmal mehr hatte sich Miami umsonst verbarrikadiert. Der Sturm kam nicht. Kurz vor der Küste hatte der Sturm gedreht und zog jetzt mit großer Geschwindigkeit in Richtung Norden. Auf offenem Meer entzog er sich jeglicher Beobachtung. Ein Schiff am Kap Hatteras meldete an das Wetterbüro am 20. September schwere See und sehr tiefen Barometerstand. Aber das beeindruckte die Meteorologen nicht, denn so weit nördlich wurde noch nie ein Hurrikan registriert. Dabei hatte am 20. September ein junger Meteorologe den exakten Kurs des Hurrikans berechnet und wollte für die Ostküste Warnungen anordnen. Sein Chef nahm ihn nicht für voll. Und Radar und Satellit gab es damals nicht. Am späten Abend erreichten die Ausläufer des Sturms schon New York. Und am nächsten Morgen erlebten New Yorker einen Sturm, den sie bisher noch nicht gekannt hatten. Noch immer hielt das Wetterbüro es nicht für angebracht, Warnungen vor einem Hurrikan auszusprechen. Gegen Mittag traf der Hurrikan mit voller Wucht auf Neuengland. Hier auf Rhode oder Long Island hatte niemand einen Sturm erwartet. Die Flut betrug teilweise über 10 Meter. Die Windgeschwindigkeit erreichte 300 Kilometer pro Stunde. Die Stadt Providence stand 7 Meter unter Wasser. Kein Haus blieb trocken. Das gesamte gelagerte Öl in der Stadt mischte sich in die Fluten. Strom und Telefon fielen für Wochen aus.
Obwohl das Wetter aufwendig erforscht wird, ist nicht vorherzusehen, wann sich eine Schlechtwetterzone zu einem Hurrikan aufbaut. Bekannt ist nur das Prinzip. Warmes, tropisches Meerwasser verdunstet und steigt in die Höhe. Dort kondensiert es und steigt weiter auf. Immer mehr feuchte, warme und damit energiegeladene Luft wird angesaugt, eine sogenannte tropische Störung entsteht. Aber wann wird sie zum kreisenden Hurrikan? Wie stark wird der Sturm und welchen Weg wird er nehmen? Dies vorherzusagen ist auch heute trotz Wettersatelliten nur schwer möglich. Um einen Hurrikan genau zu erforschen, müssen sich ihn die Meteorologen aus nächster Nähe ansehen.
Take-off noch vor Sonnenaufgang. An Bord der WC 130 ist eine Crew von Hurricane Hunters. Ihre Aufgabe, direkt in das Zentrum eines Hurrikans zu fliegen, der schon seit Tagen vor der ostamerikanischen Küste tobt. Dort soll die Crew Messungen machen und alle Daten an das Hurrikanzentrum in Miami weitergeben. Das Flugzeug, eine Konstruktion aus den 50er Jahren, wurde damals für Transport- und Aufklärungsflüge gebaut und eignet sich hervorragend für den bevorstehenden Höllenritt. Es ist ein sehr starkes, robustes Flugzeug. Ein wichtiger Grund, warum wir es benutzen, sind die 4 großen Propeller. Wir haben auch einen konstanten Spritverbrauch in jeder Höhe. Hurrikans werden je nach Windstärke in Kategorien von 1 bis 5 eingeteilt. Diesmal fliegt die Crew in einen Hurrikan der Kategorie 3 und erwartet Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 200 Kilometer pro Stunde. Noch einmal wird kontrolliert, ob das Gepäck gesichert ist. Das Flugzeug nähert sich den Ausläufern des Hurrikans und damit ersten Turbulenzen. Der Hurrikan ist groß, hat einen Durchmesser von etwa 1000 Kilometern. Die Wolkenwand muss durchstoßen werden, bevor im nahezu windstillen Zentrum, dem Auge des Wirbelsturms, eine Wettersonde abgeworfen werden kann. Wir werfen die Sonde aus dem Flugzeug, sie misst die Atmosphäre. Es gibt 5 Messungen: Druck, Temperatur, Feuchtigkeit, Windrichtung und Windgeschwindigkeit. Die Ausläufer des Sturms sind erreicht. Alle Meteorologen und Techniker an Bord müssen sich anschnallen. Im Fadenkreuz das Ziel, das Auge des Hurrikans. Schließlich haben es die Hurricane Hunters geschafft. Die Sonde wird abgeworfen, alle Daten werden an Bord des Flugzeugs registriert, gespeichert und dann via Satellit weitergegeben an das Hurricane Center in Miami. Hier zerbrechen sich dann die Meteorologen die Köpfe, sie analysieren die Zahlen und machen Vorhersagen über Stärke, Größe und Bewegungsrichtung des Hurrikans. Die Arbeit der fliegenden Hurrikanjäger ist dabei unentbehrlich. Wenn es ein richtig starker Sturm ist, der bedrohlich wird, haben wir fast die ganze Zeit ein Flugzeug draußen. Wenn es ein schwächerer Sturm ist, schicken wir alle 12 oder 6 Stunden ein Flugzeug los. Es kommt immer darauf an, wie gewaltig ein Sturm ist, wie nah er an die Küste kommt und dort Menschenleben bedroht. Noch immer ist die Erinnerung im Hurricane Center an Andrew allgegenwärtig. Vor 3 Jahren raste der Sturm über Florida hinweg mit Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 260 Kilometer pro Stunde. Es war der drittstärkste Hurrikan in diesem Jahrhundert. Als alles vorbei war, waren 15 Menschen tot, 60.000 Häuser zertrümmert, der Sachschaden 20 Milliarden $. Das Problem für Meteorologen und Hurricane Hunters: kein Sturm ist wie der andere, das macht die Hurrikans so wenig berechenbar. Einmal bin ich durch einen Taifun im Pazifik geflogen. Plötzlich sind wir gefallen, wir hatten keine Sicht und sind etwa 700 Meter pro Minute abgesackt. Es war mitten in der Nacht, das Ganze hat nur 40 Sekunden gedauert, aber für mich war das wie eine Ewigkeit. Landung in Homestead, südlich von Miami. Alles ist glatt gegangen, alle wichtigen Daten wurden übermittelt. Die Crew hat in 13 Stunden Flugzeit 4-mal in das Auge des Hurrikans geschaut. Für die Hurricane Hunters geht ein ganz normaler Arbeitstag zu Ende.
Hurrikan Floyd rast auf die Ostküste der USA zu. Die Bewohner versuchen mit allen Mitteln, ihre Häuser vor der drohenden Zerstörung zu schützen. Der Hurrikan ist so gewaltig, dass Flutwellen bis zu 10 Kilometer ins Landesinnere gedrückt werden könnten. Floyd ist ein extrem gefährlicher Hurrikan mit Geschwindigkeiten bis zu 250 Kilometern pro Stunde. Er ist damit stärker und gewaltiger als Andrew. Wirbelsturm Andrew verwüstete 1992 den Süden Floridas. 26 Menschen kamen damals ums Leben. Mehr dazu in den Pro7 Nachrichten um 7:30.
Eye of Hurricane Floyd is presently in the Caribbean, just 300 kilometers southeast of the Bahamas. CNN's Frank Buckley spoke with us earlier from Freeport.
Winds have picked up as we approach daylight here on Grand Bahama Island, but they are still at the tropical storm force that is less than 74 miles per hour. The local weather office tells us it's gusting to 60 miles per hour here. However, the winds have been strong enough throughout the islands to cause power outages, specifically in Nassau, on New Providence, and on the island of Abaco. More of a concern right now, however, are the islands of San Salvador and Cat Island. The Emergency Operations Center has not heard from either and has not been able to make contact with either island for the past 7 hours. Here on Grand Bahama Island, we are directly in the expected path of Floyd. Shelters are open for local residents. 6 were open last night, overnight. 7 more will open this morning. They are capable of handling some 4,000 of the island's 45,000 residents.
Mari Ramos joins us now from the CNN Weather Center with more on Hurricane Floyd. Mari?
Well, Relitza, we have been following this hurricane, this tremendous hurricane in the next 12 hours or so as it approaches the U.S. mainland. That report that we just heard, you'll notice on our satellite imagery, those islands that he was talking about are right here, just south of where the eye is, and that would be this area right here, and it's understandable that they haven't heard from him, unfortunately. The winds, as that eye moved through there, were up to 250 kilometers per hour. So it is a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, a tremendous force of Mother Nature here. The system has begun that turn to the north-northwest that we were expecting and actually hoping for, at least when it comes to Florida. Already the first rain bands will begin to affect Florida in the next hour or so, particularly South Florida and eventually into central and northern Florida. And as you said, we have hurricane watches all along and up and down the eastern coast of Florida. Let me show you the latest information that just came in just a few minutes ago regarding Hurricane Floyd. It's only about 250 miles east of Miami. Miami would be like right around here, and just due east is the eye of Hurricane Floyd. Maximum sustained winds down just a little bit to 240 kilometers per hour, but it continues to be a very strong Category 4 hurricane. What is expected to happen? Well, we need to watch that frontal boundary that we were expecting that will help pull the hurricane to the north. However, it could already be too close to land, and that's what we've been watching for the last few days, and the track hasn't changed much, at least through tomorrow night. We're still expecting the hurricane to continue and begin to turn to the northwest, but still already very close to the Florida's east coast, and you could experience hurricane's force winds in that. Winds extend 205 kilometers from the center, while the tropical storm force winds extend more than 450 kilometers from the center. What does this mean? Well, actually, that the system, even if it moves, far away from the Florida coast, the residents on the shoreline will receive tropical storm force winds at least, and we're expecting that to begin happening for portions of southern Florida in the next hour or so. Already we had one band of rain cross. Miami was reporting rain in the past hour that has ended, and now mostly cloudy skies, and conditions will continue to deteriorate from there. Also, this is Grand Bahama Island and this is Great Abaco Island, and as the system continues that west-northwesterly track, it will pass very close to those islands, and we do expect severe, if not intense, damage along that region as well.
Emergency officials say several days of rains have killed at least 4 people and made thousands homeless. Thousands of people living along the Lempa and Paz rivers, and they have fled to emergency shelters. Authorities are declaring a state of alert because of the flooding. The Red Cross is carrying out rescue missions and providing basic assistance to flood victims. Hurricane Floyd is heading toward the southeastern coast of the United States at a fast pace. The eye of the powerful Category 4 storm is in the Bahamas, east of Miami. CNN's Frank Buckley is in the Bahamas and joins us now from Freeport. Frank.
Rolitza, we are overlooking the Xanadu Marina, where there are boats that are moored to the pier here. They are being buffeted about by the wind that is steadily increasing. As you look out over the water here, you can see white caps in some locations, and then if you look down in other locations, if you've ever seen a helicopter hovering over the water, it's that sort of an effect where the wind is pressing down on the water and flattening it out, making it relatively calm, getting rid of the waves and making it a flat surface. The wind is the main player right now on New Providence in Nassau. There are frequent gusts, and at this moment, there are persons trapped in a house in Nassau under a tree, according to the Emergency Operations Center. They tell us that 2 children were able to escape from that house where a tree fell on the house and inform authorities. They have been told that there are other people trapped inside that house, and a rescue effort is just getting underway right now. There's a light rain there, and on New Providence they also report roof damage, parts of roofing material flying through the air, but fortunately so far no injuries have been reported. Another area of concern, the islands of San Salvador and Cat Island. Authorities at the Emergency Operations Center in Nassau have not been able to reach them, have not been able to get them on a satellite phone or police radio frequencies since about midnight, and there are some 3,000 people living on those islands. Now here on Grand Bahama in Freeport, we are directly in the path of Floyd, and the winds are picking up, as I say. It's difficult for us to show you what that looks like because we don't have the video uplink, but I'm going to get in front of a window here where we've cracked open the window so you can at least hear what the sustained winds sound like right now. That is the constant sound that you hear and feel if you're outside. The sustained winds are at approximately 53 miles per hour here in the Freeport area. Gusts are up to well over 60 miles per hour, but it is bearable, and later today, of course, the winds could get up to well over 100 and perhaps 150 miles per hour. Later today, it will get much worse. Rolita?
And speaking of that much worse, how much worse could it get?
Well, the top sustained winds are believed to be upwards of 155 miles per hour. That's one issue. The other issue, of course, is storm surge, which is often the killer in a hurricane, because storm surge is when the water, the leading edge or the front of the hurricane pushes the water ahead, and so you have the water level rising, and they're expecting that storm surge could rise to well over 15 to perhaps 20 feet. If that happens, it comes across and simply floods everything in its way. These islands, the Bahamas, are very low-lying islands. There's very little elevation. The highest peak in all of the 700 islands or keys of the Bahamas is 206 feet. So there's very little high ground to escape to. You just have to move inland to get away from the water. So there are two possible damage causers here, the wind and the storm surge, both expected later today.
Frank, thank you.
Tracking Floyd. Mari.
Well, Sonia, we have been watching the system fairly closely, and it looks like it is beginning to make that expected and much anticipated turn to the north and west. Let me show you the latest stats on the system. Still, where it's going to make landfall, we don't know. Take a look at this. First of all, we have some special information for you. This is Hurricane Floyd, and as you can see, still a powerful hurricane just east of Florida. You can see right here the coastal regions of Florida, the eye of the storm still some ways away, but the first rain bands are beginning to approach the area, and that is what we have been watching. And Disney World, or the parks in that area, are right around here. So if the system does make landfall in that general area, we could begin to see some problems in that general vicinity. Now, taking a look at our other weather maps, these are the latest statistics on Hurricane Floyd. Notice it's only about 255 miles east of Miami, so the system still moving fairly in this general direction. Let me show you our map for Wednesday morning, still in that same general area, not moving very much, headed in a west-northwesterly course right along the system. And here's the frontal boundary that we were hoping would help push Floyd away. Let me show you the temperatures now for the U.S.
Bundesstaates Florida zu. Hunderttausende Menschen sind bereits auf der Flucht.
Die Mitarbeiter im Nationalen Hurricane Center nennen ihn bereits den Monstersturm. In zahlreichen Landkreisen wurde bereits der Notstand ausgerufen. Die Bewohner decken sich ein mit Lebensmitteln, Batterien und Trinkwasser. Tausende von Türen und Fenstern wurden sturmfest gemacht. Jeder hier erwartet schwere Verwüstungen, sollte Floyd tatsächlich an Land gehen. Auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral sind die Mitarbeiter der NASA damit beschäftigt, die 4 amerikanischen Raumfähren in Sicherheit zu bringen. Die Anlage liegt nur etwa 2,5 Meter über dem Meeresspiegel. Nicht nur der Sturm, auch hohe Wellen bedeuten Gefahr. Bei der NASA gibt es keine Versicherung, wie etwa bei Privathäusern. Wenn es hier Schäden gibt, muss der Steuerzahler das übernehmen. Fast alle NASA-Mitarbeiter wurden mittlerweile evakuiert. Nur eine Notbesatzung ist noch auf dem Gelände. Sie hofft, dass ihre Raketen stärker sind als der Sturm.
Das schon, aber noch zieht er westlich auf Florida zu und wird erst später nach Nordwesten abziehen. Selbst wenn er die Küste zunächst mal nicht erreichen sollte, wird nur eine Gefahr reduziert, nämlich diese für uns unvorstellbaren Windgeschwindigkeiten. Aber die Gefahr von Überschwemmungen bleibt extrem hoch, denn mit 250 Kilometern pro Stunde peitscht Floyd das Wasser auf und riesige Wellen treiben auf die Küste zu. Und da gleichzeitig Floyd sich nur mit 24 Kilometern pro Stunde bewegt, geht das stundenlang, sodass der Wasserspiegel an der Küste ständig steigt. Aber auch wenn er es vielleicht nicht so schlimm wüten wird wie befürchtet, die Gefahr ist nicht vorbei, denn draußen auf dem Atlantik nähert sich schon wieder Gert. Und der hat jetzt schon die Hurrikanstärke erreicht.
Und es kam jedes Mal nicht so schlimm wie angekündigt. Der Wirbelsturm flaute ab oder er drehte ab, bevor er das Festland erreicht hatte. Millionen Menschen von Florida bis rauf nach Washington beten in diesen Stunden, dass sich dieses Glück wiederholt. Denn Floyd ist im Anmarsch und Floyd ist ein Monster. So hat ihn ein Experte genannt, ein Monster-Hurrikan. An Gewalt könnte er alles übertreffen, was die Amerikaner in den letzten Jahren erlebt und überstanden haben.
Auf diese Küste bei Miami rast der Hurrikan zu. Windgeschwindigkeiten von bis zu 250 Kilometern pro Stunde. Floyd heißt der Sturm, vor dem bereits Hunderttausende fliehen. Inzwischen wurde in Florida der Notstand ausgerufen. 1 Million Menschen wurden aufgefordert, ihre Häuser zu verlassen. Nach jüngsten Prognosen könnte Floyd zwischen der Mitte Floridas und den nördlicher gelegenen Staaten Georgia und South Carolina auf Land treffen. Floyd ist ein extrem gefährlicher Hurrikan mit Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 155 Meilen pro Stunde. Er ist größer und stärker als Hurrikan Andrew. Floyd zieht weiterhin westwärts auf die nordwestlichen Bahamas und Floridas Ostküste zu. Die Erinnerung an Andrew ist hier noch lebendig. Dieser Sturm machte 1992 150.000 Menschen obdachlos. 26 Menschen kamen ums Leben. Küstenbewohner vernageln ihre Fenster, versuchen ihr Eigentum und ihre Häuser vor Floyd zu schützen, der jetzt mit noch größerer Gewalt auf die Küste zuzieht. Sorgen auch bei der NASA. In den Hangars des Weltraumbahnhofs stehen 3 Space Shuttles, 4 teure Raketen in den Abschussrampen. Und die Gebäude nur für Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 200 Stundenkilometer gebaut. Keine Zeit mehr, sie abzubauen. Die 14.000 Beschäftigten bereiten sich auf die Flucht vor, Schulen geschlossen. Floridas Küstenbewohner legen Notvorräte an, Lebensmittel, Wasser, frische Batterien für Taschenlampen und Radios. Einzige Hoffnung der Experten ist, Floyd könnte auf seinem Weg gen Norden an Windstärke einbüßen. Für die Küstenregion ist aber in jedem Fall mit Überflutung zu rechnen. Und hinter Floyd zieht schon der nächste Hurrikan herauf. Sein Name Gert.
Den Hurrikan in Sicherheit zu bringen. Welche Gefahr auf sie zukommen kann, zeigte sich heute Nacht, als Floyd, so der Name des Sturms, über die Bahamas fegte. Jetzt bewegt er sich weiter in Richtung Florida. Dort hat man den Notstand ausgerufen.
Die Vorbereitungen auf Floyd laufen auf Hochtouren. Die Bewohner Floridas versuchen, ihr Hab und Gut zu schützen. Sie kaufen Holz und Metallplatten. Gemeinsam versuchen die Bewohner der Küstenorte, Türen und Fenster vor der Zerstörungswut des Sturms zu sichern. Sie besorgen sich außerdem Lebensmittel und Trinkwasser auf Vorrat. Wie lange Floyd die Menschen in Atem halten wird, ist noch ungewiss. Auf großen Leuchttafeln werden seit gestern Empfehlungen bekannt gegeben. Die Bevölkerung soll auf die Sturmwarnungen der lokalen Rundfunk- und Fernsehsender achten. Viele Bewohner der Inseln und Küstenorte wurden aufgefordert, ihre Häuser zu verlassen. Tausende aus der Region um den Urlaubsort Palm Beach sind dem Aufruf der Regierung gefolgt. Sie flohen in Schutzunterkünfte im Landesinneren. Gemäß der letzten Sturmwarnung bewegt er sich genau auf Palm Beach zu. Mein ganzer Häuserblock ist verlassen. Sie evakuieren den ganzen Stadtteil. Ich lebe direkt an der Küste und die Wellen werden immer größer. Noch können die Experten nicht vorhersagen, welchen Weg Floyd genau nehmen wird. Erst bewegt er sich mit einer Windgeschwindigkeit von mehr als 250 Stundenkilometern auf die Küste Floridas zu. Jetzt könnten auch Georgia und South Carolina in Gefahr sein. Sollte dieser Fall eintreffen, rechnen Experten mit katastrophalen Folgen. Floyd ist stark genug, um seine Richtung jederzeit zu ändern. Das macht ihn so bedrohlich. Im vorigen Oktober verwüstete Hurrikan Mitch weite Teile Mittelamerikas. Er war der stärkste Sturm der Saison im vorigen Jahr. Fürchterliche Überschwemmungen waren die Folge. Allein in Honduras starben 6.500 Menschen. Auch dieser Hurrikan hatte die Forscher und Meteorologen genarrt und überraschend seinen Kurs geändert, sodass Vorkehrungen kaum möglich waren. Die Bilanz am Ende: mehr als 11.000 Tote in Mittelamerika und 1 Million Obdachlose.
Auch die NASA macht sich wegen des aufziehenden Hurrikans große Sorgen. Sie hat Angst um die Sicherheit ihrer Shuttles auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral. Sie stehen dort in Gebäuden, die windempfindlich sind. Alle 14.000 Beschäftigten wurden aufgerufen, sich auf die Flucht vor Floyd vorzubereiten.
Der schwersten Wirbelstürme seit Jahren rast zur Stunde auf die Südostküste der USA zu. Tausende Menschen haben sich bereits vor dem Hurrikan Floyd in Sicherheit gebracht. In Florida riefen die Behörden den Notstand aus. Und auch die Nationalgarde ist in Alarmbereitschaft. Über die aktuelle Lage Mick Locher.
Er kommt langsam, aber gewaltig. Floyd, der Monster-Hurrikan. In der Karibik bedeutet das Wort Gott des Bösen. Mit dem Tempo eines Mofas wälzt er sich über den Atlantik Richtung USA. In seinem Wirbel toben Stürme mit bis zu 250 Stundenkilometern. Wie riesig der Hurrikan ist, zeigt der Größenvergleich mit Berlin. An der US-Küste erwartet man Floyd mit gemischten Gefühlen. Das ist eine irre Stimmung hier, wie kurz vor dem Weltuntergang. Die Hotels sind leer und verbarrikadiert, die Schulen geschlossen. Anzeigetafeln empfehlen neben Schutzräumen Ausweichrouten und den Rundfunk einzuschalten. Im Hurrikan-Beobachtungszentrum von Miami warnt man davor, die Naturgewalt zu unterschätzen. Floyd ist extrem gefährlich. Er ist jetzt bereits stärker und größer als Hurrikan Andrew. Andrew hatte vor 7 Jahren Südflorida niedergewalzt. 26 Menschen starben, 160.000 wurden obdachlos. Schaden 50 Milliarden Mark. Schon jetzt wurde der Notstand ausgerufen. Die Folge: Gedränge im Supermarkt und an den Tankstellen. In Miami wurde der Flughafen geschlossen. Lufthansa leitet um, LTU stornierte einen Flug für Mittwoch. Die NASA schickte alle ihre Mitarbeiter auf dem Raketenstartplatz Cape Canaveral bei Orlando nach Hause. Ebenfalls gefährdet 4 Space Shuttles. Sie stehen in Hangars, die nur vor Stürmen bis zu 200 Stundenkilometern Schutz bieten. Außerdem drohen Flutwellen, denn der Weltraumbahnhof liegt auf Meereshöhe. Bei einem Hurrikan steigt milde Luft über lauwarmem Meerwasser spiralförmig auf. Gleichzeitig fallen kalte Winde aus großer Höhe ab. Es entsteht ein Wirbel mit tödlicher Energie und viel Regen. 2000 Liter pro Tag und Quadratmeter sind keine Seltenheit. Pläne, Hurrikans mit Atombomben zu stoppen, wurden in den 50er Jahren wieder aufgegeben. Einziger Trost: über Land geht dem Megasturm schnell die Kraft aus. Aber Floyd ist noch mächtig unterwegs.
Nun haben die Amerikaner ja bereits einige Erfahrungen im Umgang mit Wirbelstürmen. Eckart Tollkühn in den USA. Hat man denn daraus gelernt, sich jetzt besser vorzubereiten?
Sie haben sicher aus diesen Erfahrungen gelernt. Sie bereiten sich besser vor. Sie versorgen sich mit Lebensmitteln, mit Wasser und Batterien. Die Evakuierungsprogramme werden lieber früher als später eingeleitet. Man sichert die Holzhäuser, die verwundbaren Holzhäuser mit Drahtseilen, mit Verschlägen. Aber die Amerikaner wissen natürlich auch, dass gegen einen Sturm wie Floyd kaum etwas zu machen ist, außer die Flucht zu ergreifen. Und das haben mittlerweile 1 Million Menschen getan.
Heißt das denn, dass es realistischerweise überhaupt keine Chance mehr gibt, dass der Wirbelsturm an Florida vorbeizieht?
Doch die Chance gibt es schon, zumindest für Südflorida. Der Sturm hat mittlerweile nach Norden abgedreht. Man rechnet jetzt damit, dass er morgen Mittag Nordostflorida oder Südgeorgia treffen wird. In Südgeorgia ist mittlerweile auch die Nationalgarde mobilisiert worden. Mittlerweile denkt man daran, dass der Sturm ein klein wenig an Kraft verloren haben könnte über den Bahamas, aber er bleibt immer noch ein Sturm der Stärke 4 und ist damit extrem gefährlich.
Haben Sie vielen Dank, Eckart Tollkühn.
Florida in Angst. 1 Million Menschen fliehen vor dem 240 Stundenkilometer schnellen Hurrikan Floyd. Gewaltigsten Hurrikans aller Zeiten bedroht die Südostküste der Vereinigten Staaten. 1 Million Menschen haben inzwischen ihre Häuser und Wohnungen verlassen, um sich im Landesinneren in Sicherheit zu bringen. Floyd, so heißt der Wirbelsturm, bewegt sich zurzeit auf Florida zu und erreicht dabei Windgeschwindigkeiten von 240 Kilometern pro Stunde. Mario Turic und Christoph Lang berichten.
Die Einwohner Floridas nehmen die Warnung ernst. Wie ernst, das beweisen diese Bilder. Kilometerlange Blechlawinen wälzen sich von der Küste ins Landesinnere. Mehr als 200.000 Menschen haben allein die Region um Miami verlassen. Der Wind an der Küste Floridas nimmt stündlich zu. Das Zentrum des Monstersturms, wie Hurrikan Floyd von US-Meteorologen genannt wird, tobt zur Stunde über den Bahamas. Mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von mehr als 200 Kilometern zieht er über die Inselgruppe. Die meisten Menschen hier haben in großen Hotels und hurrikansicheren Kellern Schutz gefunden. Über die genaue Zugbahn des Wirbelsturms wird noch gerätselt. Besonders gefährdet sind neben Florida die Küsten der US-Bundesstaaten Georgia, South und North Carolina. Was die Menschen dort nicht mitnehmen können, versuchen sie auf andere Weise vor Floyd zu schützen. Wer bleibt, versorgt sich mit dem Nötigsten. Die nächsten Tage werden sie ihre Häuser vielleicht nicht mehr verlassen können. Alle Vorbereitungen in Florida sollten heute abgeschlossen sein. Wer wartet, um zu sehen, ob die Vorhersagen zutreffen, der wartet zu lange. Kai Eichberg hat nicht gewartet. Der Deutsche, der seit 7 Jahren in Florida lebt, verlässt sein Haus, um vor bösen Überraschungen gefeit zu sein.
Morgen wird der Sturm kommen und ich möchte nicht hier sein. Ja, also das würde mein zweiter sein. Ich hoffe, dass ich ihn nicht mitmachen muss, dass ich davon verschont bleibe dieses Mal.
Zu gut hat auch er noch den letzten großen Hurrikan Andrew 1992 in Erinnerung. Damals starben in Florida 40 Menschen, ganze Landstriche wurden verwüstet. Jetzt wartet man auf Floyd und hofft, dass er weniger Kraft entfaltet als sein Vorgänger Anfang der 90er Jahre.
Und an der Küste Floridas in Titusville, nur wenige Kilometer vom Raketenbahnhof Cape Canaveral entfernt, begrüße ich jetzt unseren Korrespondenten Christoph Lang. Christoph, wie ist die Situation vor Ort und gibt es schon genauere Schätzungen darüber, wann der Hurrikan das Festland erreicht?
Peter, die letzten Vorhersagen hören sich gar nicht gut an. Ihnen zufolge wird Hurrikan Floyd genau hier, wo wir jetzt stehen, dem Festland sehr, sehr nahe kommen. Sein Auge soll in etwa 50 Kilometer Entfernung an der Küste vorbeiziehen oder im schlimmsten Fall sogar die Küste treffen. So oder so wäre die Lage hier sehr, sehr kritisch. Dann drohen Windgeschwindigkeiten von weit über 200 Stundenkilometer. Ein Sturm, wie ihn die USA seit mehreren Jahrzehnten nicht mehr erlebt hat. Titusville und auch die anderen Küstenstädte hier, sie sind wie leergefegt. Sie gleichen Geisterstädten. Die Menschen haben sich ins Landesinnere in Sicherheit gebracht. Und noch 2 Beispiele, wie ernst man hier die Lage nimmt. Disney World, obwohl 70 Kilometer im Landesinneren, wird zum ersten Mal heute Nachmittag und morgen ganz schließen. Und auch sämtliche Flüge nach Florida sind abgesagt, also auch die aus Deutschland.
Wir haben es gerade schon gesagt, Cape Canaveral ist nicht weit. Wie ist die NASA auf solch einen Sturm eingerichtet?
Die NASA macht sich hier allergrößte Sorgen. Cape Canaveral liegt genau hinter mir auf der anderen Seite dieser Lagune. Also es droht eine Katastrophe, weil der Hurrikan direkt auf das US-Raumfahrtszentrum treffen könnte. 4 Millionen teure Raketen stehen schutzlos auf ihren Startplattformen. Man konnte sie nicht mehr wegbringen. Und die NASA sorgt sich sogar um ihr Herzstück, um die 4 Space Shuttles. Die sind zwar in Hangars untergebracht, aber die halten Windgeschwindigkeiten von etwa 160 Stundenkilometern aus. Wie gehört, Floyd könnte mehr als 200 Kilometer schnell sein. Also im allerschlimmsten Fall könnte morgen früh das NASA-Raumprogramm in Trümmern liegen.
Vielen Dank für diese Informationen. Live aus Florida, Christoph Lang.
Of the Bahamas with wind gusts of up to 160 kilometers an hour. Floyd is quickly approaching the southeastern coast of the United States. Traffic along major interstate highways in Florida is jammed as the people there make their way inland. States of emergency have been declared in Florida and Georgia. South Carolina's governor has ordered a mandatory evacuation of coastal communities.
We've met during the course of the morning to follow the track of Hurricane Floyd. Unfortunately, it continues to move towards the South Carolina coast. The news is that the storm continues to be very strong. Based on the findings of the National Weather Service and the recommendations from our state emergency officials, I will declare a state of emergency in South Carolina and order an evacuation of our coastal communities effective at 12 noon today. Now, this is a mandatory evacuation, which will require that those citizens that live in the affected areas leave those areas and go to a safer haven further inland in the state.
So where is Hurricane Floyd now, and when is it most likely to make landfall? For answers and the rest of the world weather picture, we turn now to Femi Oke in the World Weather Center. Femi?
Well, John, Hurricane Floyd is heading in a westerly direction towards the eastern coast of Florida. At the moment, its hurricane wings are around about 205 kilometers out from the Isle, and it's traveling at about 13 knots. It's a very large hurricane. It's a Category 4 hurricane. In fact, it's described as catastrophic on the scale of hurricanes. Here we have a bird's eye view of the situation just off the coast of Florida. This is Floyd. This is Gert, another hurricane out in the Atlantic. It's a few days behind Floyd at the moment, so we don't need to worry about that. And this little bit here looks like another hurricane. It's what happens when you get 2 very close together, and that may develop into a tropical disturbance as well. Let's have a close look then at the coastline and see what Floyd is doing. It's heading off in that westerly direction. The main problem is going to be storm surge, basically very, very high tides. And we're looking at danger areas basically from Florida right the way up through to the Carolinas. Temperatures then for North America, Denver 19, Chicago 18. We have cooler weather behind that front heading out.
In Florida ist es fast schon eine gewohnte Übung. Wieder einmal müssen sie sich in Sicherheit bringen vor einem tropischen Wirbelsturm. Doch diesmal soll es ein besonders heftiger sein. Noch sammelt Hurricane Floyd über der Karibik seine zerstörerische Kraft. Offenbar unaufhaltsam rast er auf das Festland zu.
Die Ruhe vor dem Sturm. Verlassene Städte an Floridas Küste. Die meisten Menschen haben sich schon in Sicherheit gebracht. Hurrikan Floyd, so fürchten sie, könnte den US-Bundesstaat härter treffen als alle Wirbelstürme der vergangenen Jahre. Notunterkünfte sind in Schulen und Krankenhäusern eingerichtet. In Lebensmittelgeschäften drängen sich Kunden, um Vorräte einzukaufen, an Tankstellen, um schnell noch einmal voll zu tanken. Holzvorschläge, mit denen Fenster und Türen vernagelt werden, als Schutz vor Wasser und Wind, sind schon knapp geworden. Die NASA hat Angst, ihre Shuttles in Cape Canaveral, direkt am Atlantik, könnten selbst in ihren Hangars nicht sicher sein. Die Gebäude sind nicht solide genug konstruiert, um Windgeschwindigkeiten von über 200 Stundenkilometern standzuhalten. Die Gebäude halten schon einiges aus, einen normalen Hurrikan in jedem Fall, aber womöglich nicht einen so starken, wie er nun auf uns vorrückt. Erschreckend auch die Ausdehnung von Floyd, fast 1000 Kilometer. Alles schreit Vorsicht, ein Wolf ist unterwegs, wir wissen nur noch nicht, wen er beißt. Schon schlagen die Wellen höher. Heute Nacht könnte Floyd Florida erreichen und die Küste überschwemmen. Nur ganz vor wegen des Surfen mit dem Thrill zunehmender Gefahr.
Auf den Hurrikan Floyd, der sozusagen vor Florida liegt. Er soll sich in nordwestliche Richtungen bewegen. Wir sehen hier das typische Auge. Die Windgeschwindigkeiten betragen 250 Kilometer in der Stunde. Er selbst bewegt sich aber nur mit ungefähr 24 Kilometer in der Stunde. Und das kann man auch sehen, dass er selbst sich nicht so schnell bewegt. Das ist ja ein Filmloop sozusagen von gestern noch. Und am Rande des Bildes kann man jetzt schon den nächsten Hurrikan sehen, der dort auftaucht. Und wir werden sehen, wie er sich weiterentwickelt. Das war es erstmal für heute. Ich wünsche Ihnen noch einen angenehmen Abend.
Sich wer kann. Wenn die Natur nicht doch noch ein Einsehen hat, dann rast in circa 6 Stunden einer der schwersten Wirbelstürme seit Beginn der Messungen über das Festland von Florida. Hurrikan Floyd, der im Moment direkt auf Miami zusteuert, erreicht Spitzengeschwindigkeiten bis zu 250 Stundenkilometern. Und das heißt, die Einwohner Floridas müssen trotz aller Vorsorge mit schweren Verwüstungen rechnen. 1 Million Menschen machten sich heute auf die Flucht vor dem gefürchteten Sturm. Robert Annelsberger berichtet.
Bis zur letzten Minute versuchen die Menschen in Florida, ihre Häuser sturmfest zu machen. Sie bohren und sie hämmern, um Fenster und Türen zu verbarrikadieren. Bau- und Supermärkte haben Hochbetrieb. Holzplatten, Batterien, Wasser, Lebensmittel, Hamsterkäufe für den Ernstfall. Denn es wird ernst, daran besteht kein Zweifel. Ich kann gar nicht genug betonen, dass die Menschen an der Ostküste den Sturm ernst nehmen und alles tun sollen, um sich auf die Evakuierung vorzubereiten. Besorgt verfolgen die Experten die Bahn des Hurrikans. Das ist nicht wie der kleine Junge, der nur Angst vor dem Wolf hat. Da draußen ist wirklich ein Wolf. Wir wissen nur noch nicht, wo er beißen wird. Denn noch ist offen, ob der Hurrikan Florida frontal trifft oder vorher etwas nach Norden abdreht. Wie auch immer, Florida flieht vor Floyd. Kilometerlange Kolonnen bewegen sich von der Küste weg. Von 2 Basen der US-Luftwaffe werden Hubschrauber und Kampfflugzeuge nach Atlanta verlegt. Und auch das Kennedy-Raumfahrtzentrum in Cape Canaveral macht dicht. Alle 4 Shuttles kamen in die Halle. Die 14.000 Mitarbeiter sollen sich in Sicherheit bringen. Denn Floyd wird noch stärker sein als der Hurrikan Andrew, der den Süden Floridas 1992 verwüstete. 26 Menschen kamen damals ums Leben.
Und in Titusville, direkt an der gefährdeten Küste in Florida, ist unser Korrespondent Alexander Previtera. Alexander, in wenigen Stunden soll Floyd bei Ihnen eintreffen. Weiß man denn schon genauer wann und wie ist im Moment die Situation?
Also im Moment passiert der Monstersturm ja die Bahama-Inseln. Hier in Zentralflorida soll er erst morgen früh eintreffen. Doch die Ausläufer machen sich jetzt schon bemerkbar. Der Sturm soll in circa 50 Kilometern Entfernung an der Küste entlang gleiten Richtung Nord-Nordwest. Winde bis zu 230 Stundenkilometern sollen die Küste peitschen. Alles, was nicht nied- und nagelfest ist, wird weggerissen. Hier, wo ich stehe, sollen Wellen von ca. 8 bis 10 Metern Höhe die Küstenregion völlig überschwemmen.
Sie sagten es, ein Monstersturm, Alex, größer als Andrew. Sind die Menschen und die Behörden denn tatsächlich ausreichend vorbereitet? Wie ist Ihr Eindruck?
Also alles in allem sind die Bewohner in Florida ja Hurrikan erprobt, doch es gibt einige Probleme, insbesondere in dieser Gegend. Im Kennedy Center beispielsweise sind 3 Space Shuttles in bunkerähnlichen Gebäuden untergebracht worden. Doch rein theoretisch können diese Gebäude nur einer Windgeschwindigkeit von 190 Stundenkilometern standhalten. Das ist nur eines der Probleme. Ein weiteres Problem, die Evakuierung ist noch nicht vollzogen. Sie ist noch nicht komplett. Alle Straßen zwischen der Küste und Orlando sind völlig verstopft. Eine Blechlawine von circa 60 Kilometern Länge. Und mittlerweile sind es 2 Millionen Menschen, die evakuiert werden sollen.
Ja, auch Sie, Alexander, müssen sich wohl jetzt in Sicherheit bringen. Vielen Dank nach Florida.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center in Atlanta, and this is American Edition. Our top story right now, the impending arrival of Hurricane Floyd. The people of the southeastern coast of the United States are either getting away or bracing themselves for the onslaught of the hurricane. A state of emergency is in effect for coastal communities in Florida and Georgia. Motel accommodation is becoming impossible to find, and more than 50,000 people have already spent one night in emergency shelters. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for more than 2 million people. Hundreds of National Guardsmen have been called up to help with the evacuation. Traffic is backed up along Interstates 16 and 95 as people try to flee the path of the storm. Officials at Walt Disney World theme park say they are closing the park this afternoon because of the hurricane, the first time the park has ever done that. Meanwhile, another Florida institution is causing some concern. NASA has 4 space shuttles there. All are in hangars, but not necessarily out of danger. Tony Pipitone spoke to us earlier with more on the concerns at Kennedy Space Center and all through the state of Florida.
Well, we are in Brevard County, a coastal community that is also home to Kennedy Space Center, and the latest forecast path that has been handed to emergency managers here says they can expect winds of up to 111 miles per hour at Kennedy Space Center this time tomorrow. That is of critical concern in this community because 3 of NASA's $2 billion space shuttles are being kept in a building right now that can withstand only 105 mile per hour winds. And again, 111 mile per hour winds are being forecast. A 4th shuttle is in that landmark vehicle assembly building that's 525 feet high and can withstand 125 mile per hour winds. But those 3 other shuttles are in jeopardy if, as now being forecast, Hurricane Floyd brings 111 mile per hour sustained winds to Kennedy Space Center around 9 a.m. tomorrow. Now, elsewhere up and down the coast, residents have been asked to evacuate since last night. 160,000 coastal residents in Brevard County are under a mandatory evacuation order. All accounts are they are headed for higher ground, as has been ordered. As for Kennedy Space Center, it is virtually a ghost town today. The entire Space Center has been evacuated except for a skeletal crew that remains. Usually there are 12,500 people at the base. The problem is Kennedy Space Center is only 8 feet above sea level, and Hurricane Floyd right now is forecast to bring a storm surge of between 12 and 15 feet. So in addition to the winds, KSC could face some flooding problems.
Reporter Tony Pipitone now for the...
John, well, we here at the Weather Centre have been working on an animation. It's an idea of perhaps where the forecast may go. As you can see, it's travelling towards the coast of Florida and actually heading up the Carolina coast as well. These are the danger areas that we should look at. Let's have a closer look then, back on our satellite picture back here, and I'll be able to show you exactly what Floyd is looking like. These islands here, this is Abaco, this is Grand Bahama, very, very close to the eye of the storm. So for the next hour or so, Abaco is going to go from gusty wind temperatures and winds of 100 miles an hour to absolute calm in the eye of the storm. We can also see just here by the Florida coastline, we're already going to see some high winds and also some storms and showers as well. Now, Port of Miami, I've just called them to ask them if there are any cruises leaving. 3 left yesterday. I suspect they didn't go this way. I suspect they went round that way, and there are no cruises leaving today. Let's have a closer look then at our forecast map, and this is what a Category 4 hurricane looks like. It's very, very catastrophic. Moving on then onto our forecast map. This is what our weather's looking like. High pressure in control, moving towards this boundary here, and it's this boundary which may well just pick up Floyd and see what that's doing. Now let's have a look at your temperatures right around North America. More updates on Floyd coming up very soon.
Once again to our top story, CNN's Gary Tuckman monitoring Hurricane Floyd at Daytona Beach, Florida. Gary, how much of it has arrived?
Well, Jonathan, right now it's very nice Florida day. We've had some squalls today, but the major portion of this hurricane hasn't yet arrived here, still about 350 kilometers away. This beach is one of the most famous beaches in the United States, Daytona Beach. On a given day, you would see cars and trucks and motorcycles riding up and down the beach. That's what makes Daytona Beach so famous, because you're allowed to drive on it. But today, there is an evacuation in order. No vehicles allowed on the beach, no people allowed on the beach. About 7 hours ago, the mandatory evacuation order took effect. So for this peninsula that Daytona Beach sits on, everyone is supposed to be gone right now because of the approach of this hurricane. Right now, there are 18 shelters in this county, Volusia County, where people right now are taking up residence for the time being. And all the schools in this county are closed today, tomorrow, and Thursday. This area here is the boardwalk of Daytona Beach, normally a very crowded place, even in the middle of a weekday, especially on the weekend, and especially at springtime. It's a very famous spring break area for university students, but right now, as you can see, completely empty because it's been evacuated. People have been boarding up. You could see some of the graffiti there on the end, "Fly with Floyd," and then "Hit me, Floyd," not, little humor, "Free me, Foister." And then right in the middle there, just in case these boards blow off from this hurricane, if found, please return to Walkin' Charlie's. Walkin' Charlie's is the name of this arcade, which is usually quite busy today, but today shut down. They're expecting about 6 or 7 hours from now the tropical storm force winds to come, and then about 14 hours from now hurricane force winds. Whether they're weak hurricane force winds or very strong ones, they don't know, because they don't know how close this eye will come to the Florida coast. But people here are watching and waiting. Jonathan, back to you.
CNN's Gary Tuckman at Daytona Beach. We'll be checking in with you, I'm sure. While the powerful winds from Hurricane Floyd are likely to cause serious damage, as CNN's Natalie Pavelski explains, once it makes landfall, it's the storm's waves that will likely be remembered the most.
Hurricanes are defined by their winds, but they bring with them an even more deadly force of nature, water, in the form of storm surge.
Storm surge is a big pile of water that gets pushed up ahead of the storm by the high winds, much like water gets pushed up in front of the bow of an ocean-going boat.
Where a hurricane hits land, the storm surge does most of the damage and causes 9 out of 10 deaths.
If you can imagine, you know, being hit by a freight train moving at 20 or 30 miles an hour, these weigh a lot more than a freight train.
If the water is high enough the way you can't get above it, you're going to drown, and your life is at stake.
The last time the United States Atlantic coast faced a hurricane as strong as Floyd, Hurricane Andrew came ashore with a 15-foot storm surge. That's part of the reason the 1992 storm ended up the United States' most costly natural disaster. And since forecasters say Hurricane Floyd is packing a storm surge of 15 to 20 feet, they are warning people in its potential path to pay close attention to where this giant storm is heading. Natalie Pavelski, CNN.
If you have access to the internet, you can read more about many of our stories. CNN has an extensive site on the World Wide Web covering international news and features. For a multimedia look at current events, go to our CNN Interactive homepage at CNN.com. That's all for this American edition. I'm Jonathan Mann. Stay tuned now for World News from Washington.
Hurricane Floyd, a dangerous storm, is lashing the Bahamas right now, and it's predicted to hit the U.S. mainland in the next hours. We get the latest from Femi Oke. Femi.
Thank you, Sonia. Preparations continue as Hurricane Floyd heads towards the Florida coast. I'm sure you've seen these pictures all the way through the day. It is a Category 4 hurricane, and over the next few hours or so, Abaco Island would reach in the eye, and in the eye of the storm, it's actually very, very calm, and then it will see winds of 100 miles an hour. Come a little closer into that satellite picture. We do have our hurricanes heading across the Atlantic, covered from every conceivable angle. This here is Gert, just off the edge of the globe as it circles around there. We have Hurricane Floyd, and as we watch off the coast of Senegal, more tropical disturbances forming, and we'll be watching those very carefully.
Die Vorbereitungen auf den Hurricane Floyd. Menschen versorgten sich mit Baumaterial, um ihre Häuser zu verrammeln. Morgen soll der Sturm den Südosten der USA erreichen. An der Ostküste Floridas verließen mehr als 1 Million Menschen ihre Häuser, um sich im Landesinneren in Sicherheit zu bringen. Erste Ausläufer des Hurricanes haben bereits die Küste erreicht. Floyd fegte bisher mit bis zu 230 Kilometern in der Stunde auf Florida zu.
Shutters are up and tens of thousands of people are in shelters as Hurricane Floyd threatens to unleash its power on Florida's east coast in a matter of hours. The actual U.S. landfall is forecast for Wednesday night. Authorities in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina have ordered 2.2 million people to evacuate, and for the first time ever, Disney World in Orlando has closed.
Seiten, die Einwohner von Florida müssen höchstwahrscheinlich auch dieses Jahr dafür bezahlen, dass sie eine der angenehmsten Ecken des Planeten bewohnen. Hurricane Floyd rast auf den Südosten der USA zu. Er bedroht auch die wohl bekannteste Hightech-Anlage der Welt, das Kennedy Space Center.
Der Himmel über Florida ist dunkel, der Wind peitscht die Wellen an der Südostküste der USA Meter hoch. Der Hurricane Floyd hat einen Durchmesser von rund 1000 Kilometern. Das Auge des Zyklons bewegt sich mit etwa 22 Kilometern in der Stunde auf Florida zu. Meteorologen erwarten, dass der Wirbelsturm noch in dieser Nacht den US-Bundesstaat erreicht. In South Carolina und Florida bereiten sich die Anwohner auf Floyd vor. Mit Sperrholzplatten sichern sie Fenster und Türen, versuchen, ihre Häuser sturmfest zu machen. Die Winde kreisen mit Geschwindigkeiten von bis zu 230 Kilometern in der Stunde um das Zentrum des Sturms. Rund 2 Millionen Küstenbewohner wurden von den Behörden aufgefordert, die gefährdeten Gebiete zu verlassen und Schutz im Inneren des Landes zu suchen.
Wir sind jetzt in den USA mit Ulrich Adrian verbunden. Guten Abend.
Guten Abend.
Wo ist der denn, der Floyd, im Augenblick?
Er ist jetzt im Moment 313 Kilometer ost-südöstlich von Palm Beach in Florida und wir haben vor wenigen Minuten die neuesten Daten über Floyd hineinbekommen. Der Wind ist etwas stärker geworden, er hat jetzt 251 Kilometer in der Stunde an Geschwindigkeit und der Hurrikan ist etwas langsamer geworden. Er bewegt sich nur noch mit 14 Meilen in der Stunde, das sind 22,5 Kilometer und er hat einen kleinen Knick gemacht. Jetzt rechnet man damit, dass er erst morgen Abend die amerikanische Küste erreichen wird und wahrscheinlich nicht mehr in Florida, sondern bei der Stadt Savannah. Das ist genau an der Grenze zwischen den Bundesstaaten Georgia und South Carolina.
Also das Kennedy Space Center mitsamt seinen Shuttles ist außer Gefahr.
Nein, das kann man nicht sagen, denn der Hurrikan wird so nah an der Küste hochschießen, dass die Winde so groß sein können, dass die Space Shuttles unter Umständen beschädigt werden. Sie müssen sich vorstellen, da stehen in den Hallen 4 Space Shuttles, jede kostet $2 Milliarden und dieser Hangar hält nur einen Wind aus von 200 Kilometer in der Stunde. Floyd hat mehr und auf den Abschussrampen stehen alleine 4 Raketen, die haben die NASA-Mitarbeiter nicht mehr so schnell abgebaut bekommen. 14.000 Mitarbeiter mussten gestern und heute evakuiert werden. Es ist jetzt nur noch eine Notbesatzung von 80 Personen da und die kann die Raketen nicht mehr abbauen. Im schlimmsten Fall wird das amerikanische Raumfahrtprogramm um 10 Jahre zurückgeworfen.
Warum ist dieser Floyd eigentlich so einzigartig? Die Meteorologen auf CNN geraten fast ins Schwärmen, obwohl es so schrecklich ist.
Ja, sie geraten fast in Schwärmen, weil dieses Auge des Hurrikans so exakt ist und weil es sozusagen ein Bilderbuch-Hurrikan ist. Ein Grund ist wohl folgender. Brutstätte eines solchen Hurrikans sind Gewitterzellen im Atlantik entlang des Äquators. So entsteht ein Hurrikan überhaupt. Und gefährlich wird es immer dann, wenn die Wassertemperatur besonders hoch ist. Sie muss mindestens 26,5 Grad Celsius haben, sonst gibt es gar keinen Hurrikan. Und bei der Entstehung von Floyd war sie über 35 Grad warm, besonders warm für einen Hurrikan. Und deswegen sieht es so aus, dass Floyd unter Umständen sogar der stärkste Sturm in diesem Jahrhundert werden könnte. Auf der Katastrophenskala für Hurrikans von 1 bis 5, und 5 heißt katastrophal, hat er im Moment die Rangfolge 4,7. Und das bedeutet, er ist fast eine Katastrophe. Es gab in diesem Jahrhundert nur 2 Stürme auf der Welt, die stärker waren. Der eine war 1935, damals hatten die Hurrikans noch keinen Namen. Der traf die Keys in Florida. Und dann gab es den Hurrikan Camille, der traf 1969 den Bundesstaat Texas.
Vielen Dank, Ulrich Adrian, mit dem Neuesten über Floyd.
Gerne.
Auch bei uns steht
Floyd, still a massive storm is bearing down on the southeastern United States, tearing into the Bahamas, cutting off power and communications. From CNN in Washington, this is Worldview. I'm Judy Woodruff.
And I'm Bernard Shaw. Gigantic in size and in the fury of its winds, Hurricane Floyd is on a collision course with the United States coastline. Florida and Georgia have been declared federal disaster areas by President Clinton even before the storm hits. For the very latest, we go to Valerie Voss in the CNN Weather Center. Valerie?
Well, Bernie, you can see what a well-organized storm this is, the circular development and the eye, which is not quite as distinct as it was just a couple of hours ago, probably because it's interacting with the Abacos Islands in the Bahamas. We've had reports all day long from them of some winds up over 100 miles an hour. And you can see bands also already affecting Florida. These are the most recent coordinates from the National Hurricane Center. Winds of 140 miles an hour. This is a strong Category 4 hurricane. It's moving northwest now at 12 miles an hour. It's made a little bit of a turn to the right, 235 miles southeast of Cape Canaveral, and these are the coordinates. The National Hurricane Center has changed somewhat these watches and warnings. We now have hurricane warnings in effect from Boca Raton, Florida, up along the Florida coast, the Georgia coast, and the South Carolina coast to Little River Inlet. These are hurricane warnings. The hurricane watches stretch from Little River Inlet northward to the Cape Charles Light in Virginia. And meanwhile, south of Boca Raton, a tropical storm warning remains in effect down to Florida City, although the tropical storm warning that was in effect for the Florida Keys has been discontinued. The center of this storm is forecast to move very close to the east coast of Florida, so the winds there right now are gusting about 50 miles an hour or very near that, and as it continues up that way, they could get stronger. It could make landfall somewhere along the South Carolina coast sometime on Thursday. Bernie?
Valerie, one question. How important is it for people in these areas to remain absolutely vigilant regardless of what the computer models say?
Well, Bernie, it's very important. First of all, there are no perfect forecasts for the tracks of hurricanes. And if you take a look at this eye, imagine it right here off the east coast of Florida or moving over just 20 miles onto the coast. It would change not only the strength of the winds, but the storm surge. And as you know, most people die or the damage is produced by this storm surge in hurricanes. With a Category 4, that could be 15 feet above normal.
Valerie Voss, thank you. Judy?
At this hour, the fragile island chain of the Bahamas is bearing the brunt of Floyd's fury. We do not have pictures to show you. CNN's satellite transmission has been down all day, and we have been unable to contact our correspondent in Freeport, Frank Buckley, or for that matter, anyone else in the island since early Tuesday afternoon. Earlier reports indicate widespread damage. Strong winds have torn roofs off of homes, ripped through buildings, and brought down power lines. Meanwhile, people are escaping the Florida coast in what could be part of the largest evacuation in U.S. history. Taking shelter with those who have stayed behind in Jacksonville, Florida, is CNN's Brian Cabell. Brian.
For the next day or two, maybe more, the 1,000 residents at Landmark Middle School will get to know each other really well. The quarters are cramped here. The beds are rock hard. The amenities are few. Still, consider the alternative outside, Hurricane Floyd.
I want to leave Jacksonville. I want to stay. I've never been through a hurricane.
Sabrina McCormick and her family have additional problems. She had been in the hospital until Tuesday, so her husband Mike had to take care of their baby. Problem was, Mike was supposed to ship off with the USS Kennedy. It's an unauthorized absence.
I won't really say it's justified, but you got to do what you have to do to take care of your family. And that's what you got to do.
Some evacuees arrive here with medical problems. A makeshift clinic has been set up. So far, so good.
We've got cots, we've got blankets. We have a few more blankets on the way, pillows and blankets, and food. Those are our major needs right now, and so far we've got those covered.
Kids are taken care of as well. A game room set up for them. Tyron Sampson seems perfectly happy.
Because he was running around earlier, and to have him settle down and do an activity is great.
Adults seem less excited about the accommodations. Number one wish, a comfortable bed, a good night's rest.
No, I didn't get any sleep last night, so probably not tonight either.
For the last hour or so, we have been hearing the announcement repeatedly. No more people allowed here at Landmark Middle School. They expected about 1,000. They have 1,200. They say they can handle that, but absolutely no more. They are handing out dinner tickets. They just don't have any more medical facilities or places on the floor, frankly. People will be sleeping on the floor tonight. A few of the lucky ones have cots, but otherwise they are filled up, and they'll be here probably, they say, for at least a couple more days. The hurricane wind should hit sometime tomorrow. I'm Brian Cabell, CNN Live in Jacksonville, Florida.
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has evacuated most of its 12,000-plus workers from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. About 80 NASA workers volunteered to stay behind and ride out the storm. NASA spokesman George Diller joins us by telephone now. Mr. Diller, what's the status of the 4 shuttles, which I'm told are worth $2 billion apiece down there?
That's correct. They're secured in the hangars where they're worked on. 33 of the shuttles, 3 of the orbiters are in hangars. 1 is in the vehicle assembly building, and they have had their landing gear raised. The payload bay doors are closed. The main engines have been covered, and we will have a handful of people that will stay with each orbiter throughout the storm should anything catastrophic happen, and that will be the same also with the payloads.
Now, these buildings were built to withstand winds of 125 miles per hour. What happens if they kick up higher than that?
Well, then we're going to have a problem. The buildings vary. The vehicle assembly building is 125 miles per hour. The hangars where the other orbiters are 105. The payload facilities are about 110. But it looks like from the forecast we have at the moment, we're going to be right on the edge of having a concern. We're predicting winds of 114 miles an hour mid-morning tomorrow, with the eye about 34 miles off the coast. So
and quickly to Cape Canaveral, rockets worth $628 million. Any satellite payloads on board those rockets?
I believe there is a satellite on one of those rockets. But
so you're crossing your fingers, it sounds like.
I can't speak firsthand to that because those are not NASA payloads that are involved on those rockets.
So it sounds like you're crossing your fingers there.
Well, we try to keep faith in our doubts here. We'll kind of, hope that the forecast cuts us a little bit of slack and live in hope.
Okay, thank you. NASA spokesman George Diller. About 150 miles south of Jacksonville in Daytona Beach, Floyd's core is expected to be just offshore by midnight. The wind is steadily picking up in Daytona Beach, where CNN's Gary Tuckman is standing by. Gary?
Well, Bernie, it takes extraordinary circumstances to turn a beach like Daytona Beach into an empty beach on a day when there actually has been quite a bit of sun. The sun's gone now, the squalls have come and gone, but it will be getting worse as the hours go on. And because of that, because of the potential for destruction here, this beach was evacuated 6 a.m. this morning, about 12 hours ago. Not only the beach, but the entire coast of Volusia County, where Daytona Beach is located, and much of the northern and central Florida coast. There's a lot of concern about the businesses along the coast. For example, we're standing right next to a place called the Main Street Pier here in Daytona Beach. It's been shut down since yesterday. You can see at the end of this quarter-mile pier a green building. That is an 85-year-old restaurant, the Main Street Pier restaurant. It has taken everything Mother Nature has thrown at it over the last 8.5 decades. There's a little concern if it could take what is coming tonight and tomorrow. And 18 stories in the air, about 181 feet in the air. This Space Needle, they call it, like the one in Seattle. Right at the middle of it, the elevator, it's been put there to balance it out. It was built 30 years ago. This area hasn't been directly hit by a hurricane for 39 years. They're concerned about what can happen to that Space Needle. So people here are hoping for the best. Closed for hurricane preparations this pier, as are many businesses and houses in Volusia County, Florida. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Thanks, Gary. That is the picture in Daytona Beach. Well, people living in South Florida began bracing for the worst from Floyd, but as the forecast evolves, they have started to relax just a bit. CNN's Mark Potter is in Hollywood, Florida.
Dawn on Florida's southeast coast brought good news for this area from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Floyd was beginning its long-awaited northwest turn, which would keep the worst weather offshore and away from South Florida. It was a welcome relief for people who had stood in long lines at hardware stores the day before.
People saw the storm, how large it was, how intense it is, and I believe everybody was really afraid of this storm, and they realized this is one that we have to pay attention to.
By order of the Miami Beach Police, the beach is closed.
Even with the new forecast, police continue to enforce the evacuation orders issued the day before and tried to convince residents to stay away from the coast.
We're still urging them to either stay indoors or to heed the warnings and get off of the beach while they still can in case this hurricane were to turn around and, come back and strike us full force.
With the morning papers screaming the obvious headline, workers removed all the newsstands. Even with most of the storm out in the Atlantic, the concern was that tropical storm force winds could still blow things away. This area along the Hollywood beach was part of the evacuation zone. But as you can see, not everyone chose to leave. In fact, as the day progressed and word spread of the reprieve from Hurricane Floyd, more and more people showed up at the beach to enjoy the winds and kicked up waves. Even with passengers inconvenienced at the Miami airport because of canceled flights, the overall feeling was that South Florida had dodged the bullet. Mark Potter, CNN, Hollywood, Florida.
And I think they mean by that, Bernie, very South Florida.
Yes.
Now,
Hunderttausende sind bereits vor Floyd geflüchtet, der sich mit einer Geschwindigkeit von bis zu 250 Stundenkilometern auf die Küste zubewegt. Der Hurrikan ist nach Stärke und Windgeschwindigkeit vergleichbar mit dem Wirbelsturm Andrew, der im August 1992 das Küstengebiet verwüstete. Ralf Hogestraat über die drohende Naturkatastrophe.
Die Evakuierung begann schon in der Nacht. Ein unendlicher Lichterwurm drängte ins Landesinnere. Bei Tageslicht machten sich dann auch die letzten Uneinsichtigen auf den Weg. Die Autos standen kilometerlang. Vorher hatten die Menschen noch kurz ihre Häuser zugenagelt und die Gartenmöbel in den Swimmingpool geworfen, damit sie nicht davonfliegen. Mindestens 2 Millionen Menschen sind den Evakuierungsanordnungen in Florida gefolgt. Sie haben Zuflucht bei Verwandten oder in einer der rund 6.000 Notunterkünfte in der relativen Sicherheit des Landesinneren gesucht. Wer diesen Sturm ausreiten will, der ist verrückt, hatten die Verantwortlichen eindrücklich gewarnt. Hurricane Floyd ist ein Monster, doppelt so groß wie Florida, Windgeschwindigkeiten bis zu 300 Stundenkilometer. Derzeit tobt Floyd über den Bahamas und seit Stunden gibt es kaum Kontakt zu diesen Inseln. Als Andrew 1992 das südliche Florida verwüstete, war er gerade mal ein Drittel so groß wie Floyd. Und was Windgeschwindigkeiten von 300 Stundenkilometern anrichten können, zeigen diese Experimente. Ein Balken zersplittert restlos, nur eine massive Betonwand kann ihm widerstehen. Und dieser amerikanische Reporter steht bei nur 200 Stundenkilometern im Windkanal. Ich kann kaum noch reden oder atmen. Das ist das Äußerste an Windgeschwindigkeit, das ein Mensch ertragen kann. Jetzt würden Autos oder Bäume durch die Luft gewirbelt, sagt er. Die amerikanische Luftwaffe hat ihre in Florida stationierten Flugzeuge evakuiert. Fast alle Fluggesellschaften haben ihre Flüge von und nach Florida eingestellt. Die Flughäfen sind zu Geisterstädten geworden. Und über Cape Canaveral herrscht gespannte Ruhe. 4 Raketen blieben auf den Startrampen zurück. Die Raumfähren stehen in den Hangars. Wenn Floyd hier direkt trifft, müssen Amerikas Astronauten einige Jahre am Boden bleiben. Unsere Gebäude sind nur für eine bestimmte Windgeschwindigkeit gebaut. Dieser Hurrikan könnte all unsere Vorbereitungen sinnlos machen, sagt der NASA-Sprecher. In 24 Stunden weiß man, ob Florida vielleicht noch einmal mit einem blauen Auge davonkommt. Alle Vorbereitungen sind abgeschlossen. Die Notfallzentralen sind einsatzbereit. Die Helfer haben den Kurs von Floyd immer im Blick. Die größte Gefahr besteht in den nächsten 24 Stunden für Zentral- und Nordflorida von Cape Canaveral nordwärts. Unsere Berechnungen sagen, dass der Sturm sehr dicht an die Küste herankommt und ein direkter Treffer ist möglich. Jetzt bleibt nur noch hoffen und beten, dass Floyd vielleicht doch an der Küste vorbeischrammt. Aber die Hurrikansaison hat ja gerade erst begonnen. Hinter Floyd wartet schon der nächste Sturm draußen im Atlantik.